Okay, today is February the 17th, the year 2021. Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Present.
Lane Lewis,
Present.
Blake Tresson,
Here.
David Smelser, David Smelser, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Mic turned off. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, and President Cox.
Yes. Let's all stand for the pledge, please, in our own way.
Okay,
I pledge allegiance to
Allegiance
the flag
to the
of the United States of
States of
America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Amen.
okay,
What is that?
all right.
Okay, first item on the agenda, as always, is public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board on any item not on the agenda, now is the time. Go ahead, Rochelle.
Okay, I have already distributed previously submitted public comments for your consideration. And at this time, I do have hands raised for public comment in the attendee list. So I will go ahead and call upon them now. And first we have Miss Jane Davis. And go ahead, Miss Davis.
Yes, good morning. My name is Jane Davis. I'd like to comment about TTSA's non-compliance with the flow meter calibration requirements set out by the State Water Resources Control Board. In November, I appeared before you and questioned TTSA's performance in calibrating and reporting on its influent flow meters. LaRue Griffin responded and told you that TTSA was unable to calibrate and report the main influent flow meter because there was no such meter at the headworks. He deceived you. As the TTSA Tribune recently reported in an interview with a former employee, not only is there an influent flow meter in the headworks, but before LaRue Griffin arrived at TTSA, that meter, along with all the meters measuring input from the member districts, were routinely calibrated in conformance with your permit. But you unquestioningly accepted Mr. Griffin's claim. Instead, you should assert some control and accountability. Is it okay with you that your general manager lies to you? Is it okay with you that you are continually violating your permit? Is it okay with you that TTSA is falling apart under your stewardship? I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And let's see. Now we also have Pippin Mader. And I'd like to remind everyone that public comment is for any comments not related to an item already on the agenda. Pippin, if you would like to speak, you may do so.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. TTSA board, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. As Rochelle just said, my name is Pippin Mader. And for the last 6 years or so, I've been watching TTSA spiral out of control and wondering why the public in general didn't see it. But the recent article in Moonshine Inc., I think, lays it out pretty well. To be clear, I did not participate in the Moonshine Inc. article at all. None of my public comments were quoted, and I didn't speak to the author. And I did find it quite interesting. I did learn some things from reading that article that I didn't previously know. I ask you as board members, does this article concern you? Your GM says no one has a problem with their management style, but almost 80% of people have left in the last 5 years. And even with almost everyone leaving, it appears that nearly half of the employees are still disgruntled. I think this is concerning. I learned some new things while reading the article. It sure sounds like Lahontan is very likely to take action because of the violations. And make no mistake, these violations are because of a lack of leadership and high turnover. The institutional knowledge has left, and in many cases, employees who are left are not inclined to properly train their replacements. There's also a general feeling that the most effective way to stay in management's good graces is to suck up to people in power and do whatever management asks you to do, even if you know it isn't morally or technically correct. But that is how to get ahead at TTSA, and the results are fairly clear. I know this board has said that they want things to get better and they don't want the plant to keep violating. You have been on this course for the last half decade, and from the outside, I don't see that this kind of the kind of definitive positive actions being taken that would change the trajectory of an entire agency. I ask this board to take a definitive action that is needed to reset TTSA onto a path of success immediately before things spiral even farther out of control. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippin. And let me refresh here. And I have no other public comments besides what had been previously distributed for your consideration. That is all I have, President Cox.
Okay, Rochelle, could you see to it that the comments that were brought before us here in public comment be entered into the record?
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving on to professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries.
Vicki, would you mind addressing that, please?
If I can unmute myself, there we go. Good morning, President Cox and directors. Just wanted to acknowledge staff for any professional achievements award anniversaries. And while we don't have any of those this month, we do have a new employee, which is Luke Swan. He works in the IT department and has been hired as an IT specialist. I do see that Luke is on as a attendee on our meeting today, and just want to welcome Luke and say we're really excited to have you here. And seen Luke around the agency, you know, helping out already. He wasted no time in jumping in and getting his feet wet. So welcome, Luke, and we thank you for coming to TTSA.
Okay, anything else, Vicki?
Not right now, but a little bit later, yes.
Okay, let's move on ahead then to the consent agenda items 1 through 4. If everyone has had a chance to review these items, anything out of the ordinary that should be brought before the board's attention?
I would move approval of the consent calendar. I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve by Dan and a second by Lane Lewis. A roll call, please.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion-
Moving along to section 5, the regular agenda. First item is the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of January the 20th, the year 2021. If everyone has had a chance to review item 1 and they find all issues stated in the minutes of the board meeting in order, they will be entered into the record and will stand as read. Any additions, alterations, or corrections? Go ahead, Rochelle.
Director Cox, the minutes and associated documents in the agenda and board packet includes some confidential personnel information that should have been redacted. And prior to filing and posting the final approved minutes, staff will redact the confidential and personnel information. That is associated to some of the public comment items, and we will take care of that prior to posting them and approving them and posting them online.
Okay, so everything else with the January the 20th board meeting are in fact intact and will stand as read. Any other additions or corrections?
Wait a second. I got a question. I mean, if somebody brings us and makes public information about an employee, do we not, I mean, does that become public information or is that still confidential information? Dick.
Yeah, let me answer that. It becomes public information, but the next step that happens, Lane, is the agency makes the choice, and you don't have to, but it chooses to put this stuff on your website. And it's the act of placing it on your website as a somewhat of a permanent document that in that process, the agency takes an additional step to protect the privacy interests of employees who may not want their confidential information displayed permanently on the agency website. So as that additional step, I mean, the public can submit whenever they want, yes, but we then have some discretion about what we choose to put on the agency website, and in exercising that discretion, take an extra step to protect the privacy interests of your employees.
You know, if somebody is sending us correspondence about other employees, prior to us receiving that information, do we have an obligation to take to redact names and stuff to protect the employees?
Well, in hindsight for this particular one, we probably should have done the redacting before it showed up in your agenda packet. But frankly, we missed it.
Okay.
But we're going to fix it as the next step before we permanently file it to the website.
Okay, thank you, counsel.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we approve this agenda item?
So I have one, Dale.
Go ahead.
So just to follow up on that last dialogue. So my understanding is we receive, if we receive written comment from the public that they request be included in the, as public comment on one of our board meetings, typical process is to take that public comment, include it verbatim, and provide it to the directors and as a part of our board packet. We've got these limited instances where that individual who's choosing to provide us that public comment may be providing us public comment that would be confidential to one of our employees. And it kind of puts us in a very strange situation between needing to balance being transparent with providing public comment that we receive to the general public, while at the same time protecting employee confidentiality. And that's what drives the need for these redactions from time to time. And I'd say that in my experience in the public sector, it's very unusual, for a public agency to be receiving public comment that includes confidential information about its employees. But that's where we're at the moment. So, do I understand that correctly, Dick?
That was a very good summary, Dan, and I would also concur that in my many decades of doing this stuff, this is an extraordinary situation.
Okay, thank you.
Just so the board is aware, these public documents are attached to the board meeting. We're not required to do so, and they're published on the board on the website. If the board wishes to only post to the website just the minutes and not the supplemental documents, we can do so as well.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we accept the minutes with those changes.
Okay, motion on the floor, need a second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Lewis, seconded by Director Wilkins. Roll call, please.
Director Wilkins?
Yes, but I've got a question. Do we need to take, or maybe we've done it already, public comment?
We have not taken public comment on this item, but we do have a hand raised for that. President Cox, would you like to take that before we do roll call?
You mean public comment?
Yes.
Let's open this agenda item up to any public comment.
Okay, we have Pippin Mater. Go ahead, Pippin.
Thanks, guys. I just want to say that my assumption as a member of the public, when I make public comment, is that that is now in the public realm. And in the same way that attorney-client privilege is one directional, as in an attorney can't disclose that information, but of course, the client can disclose that same information. I think that once a member of the public has disclosed confidential information, it is no longer confidential. And I recognize that the agency doesn't necessarily want to be in a position where they appear to be providing confidential information, but just because of the source of the information, I feel like in full transparency, that all of that public comment should be provided. And by redacting parts of it, it makes some of the public comment not necessarily make sense. So I would encourage that to be provided, because that is no longer confidential once it's been made public by the employee. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippin.
Okay, Counselor, any follow-up to that comment?
The only follow-up is that the information that we're receiving is not information we're receiving from agency employees. It's information we're receiving from members of the public.
Okay, with that being said, we have a motion on the floor and a second. No further public comment.
No, sir.
Roll call, please.
Director Wilkins?
Yes.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Tresson?
Yes.
Director Smelser?
Yes.
And President Cox?
Yes.
Motion.
Next item on the agenda is the discussion of a temporary sewer service charge relief due to the economic hardships caused by COVID-19. Go ahead, LaRue.
Thank you, President Cox. Since our last board meeting, I've received numerous emails from the public requesting a sewer service charge relief. I did inform them that our rules and regulations do not afford the general manager or staff to provide a sewer service charge relief. However, they could request that relief directly to the board of directors. And in doing so, they have submitted 2 letters which are attached in the board packets. One is from Mr. Johnny Rosher, and the second one is from Mr. Douglas Dale. Although there are not other letters submitted, I had conversations with other members of the public who also are requesting a sewer service charge. In lieu of having individual agenda items to address each request, I thought it was appropriate that we revisit the discussion of a general sewer service charge relief program. That way we would have direction for the current requests and future requests. I'd like you guys to know that there are other agencies that have a program in place, and they do vary, and they include Tahoe City PUD and North Tahoe PUD. So I ask that the board of directors revisit this discussion, which we had in June of 2020, to see if there's any interest in revisiting a COVID relief, a sewer service charge relief plan. I think in June, when we first addressed this, COVID was fairly new. It has gone on now for almost over a year, or approaching a year. And I thought it would be appropriate that we address this so we can contend with any requests we have. So with that, I ask that the discussion be had and I can address any questions you have pertaining to options and what's being done in other member districts.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open this discussion up first with the board of directors. You know, as you recall, last year when we discussed this, I know myself and maybe one other director was a little reluctant to have any kind of relief due to COVID, but this has gone on for a year now. And I think that there might be a little change of heart as far as for, I know myself, there's a lot of small restaurants that have been closed down that have not been generating any income at all. And I feel that there's a possibility that our agency ought to sit back and show sensitivity to some of these commercial connections that have been totally closed down and not able to generate any income. Now, I do know that last year we discussed this in detail, and we talked about giving relief could be construed as a gift of public funds. And at this time, I want to revisit each one of the board members to find out what they and how they feel about where we are a year from where we discussed this last time. So I'd like to open up the discussion to Director Lewis first off. Has your thoughts changed at all, Lane?
Well, I abstained last time. I do have a financial interest here, and I do not want to participate.
Okay, Director Tesson.
Hi, Dale. LaRue, I guess as far as giving direction back to staff in terms of coming up with a relief program, you know, I'm certainly sympathetic. I thought the letters written from the two restaurant owners were well written. I appreciated the first one from the owner of the Zay's restaurant outlining the constraints they've worked under. I remember some of the concerns we had, which were that, you know, how do you define which customer classes are going to be subject to any relief? Because some commercial and some of our commercial customers have done quite well through COVID, and some have been negatively impacted. And so how do we, you know, come up with a protocol that defines which customer groups we deal with? There's also the concern that we deal directly with property owners, not necessarily the business owners, and that, you know, the relief would be going to property owners, and how does that translate to actually providing relief to the business owners? There's no guarantee of that. And so I think some of the same concerns that we addressed a year ago almost still exist. And if, you know, if staff can come up with a methodology, clearly restaurants, I think in general, you could say they've been probably negatively impacted, but I don't know that every commercial customer has. And so I'd be looking for, you know, hopefully a way of doing this. And I know that
Sure.
Implementation was complicated by, is this going to be on a case-by-case basis where members have to, you know, they don't have to come to the board each time, but they have to individually apply for this relief? Or is it something we're going to blanket, you know, decide that everybody in a customer class gets it from TTSA? So it's challenging. You know, there should be some nexus truly between not just the economic impact, but the you know, their sewer contribution and potentially the impact of the district. I don't think that, you know, just the economic impact in and of itself necessarily warrants a relief that would be kind of a gift of public funds. But if we can draw a nexus between, you know, the impact in their production of wastewater and therefore a reduced impact on the agency, you know, there's a nexus there that makes sense for us to, you know, reduce their user fees and provide some relief.
Right. Your recollections is accurate, Blake. When we addressed this back in June, if I recall correctly, it was a resolution and it was a blanket, well, for consideration was a blanket relief for all commercial properties. Just to fill you in on what some other member districts do, there is one district that is following the same suit where they provided, I believe, 50% of relief for all commercial properties without a screening or nexus to find out who's really subject and has shown some hardships. There is another district that has a program where you would apply and they would have to show that they did have a hardship. So while discussing with staff here, we think the appropriate thing is to do a program where we would provide relief under a application process where they have to show relief, because I believe you're right. I don't think all commercial properties were encountering hardships. Restaurants, most definitely. When it comes down to finding out what the criteria, it may be as simple as showing that there's there's been restrictions placed on them, that there's other certifications for closures, various criteria that we listed, that could be listed on there. And we think that that's the appropriate method there. And then when it comes in, we would review each case and review it actually as a case-by-case basis. It does bring a little hardship on staff to perform such a task, but we think that's the appropriate thing to do. We've also thought that that could also be applied to residential. So even though the commercial properties are suffering, the employees that are in those businesses are also suffering as well, because if there's a reduction in business there, it could equate to a reduction in salaries and hardships on the residential side. So it depends on which way the agency wants to go. But to summarize it, we do think there should be a program in, it should be a criteria met for it to be awarded. And to have a nexus on how flows are done, that's going to be complicated for us to do because we don't have meters to equate what the flows are going to be. We make assumptions, but that's all they would be. So I hope I addressed everything there, Blake.
Yeah, thanks, LaRue. You know, I know that the agenda packet didn't include a proposal, but the one that, and again, I remember now that last June, the blanket relief one did not, you know, get accepted, but I think the one you're hinting at right now would be something I'd be willing to look at. So I encourage, at least at this point, my direction would be to try and flesh that out and bring that to the board in March. And you know, I guess one of the questions will be, how do you know, is this retroactive or is it just going forward? You know, what is the extent of the relief that we provide? And so I guess I could either, I don't know if you have ideas that we want to discuss at this point, or whether that's something that we would probably hammer out at a subsequent board meeting. And
Right. So the intent of this agenda item today was just to have a discussion to see if there was any desire to have a relief program. And then during the conversation, we'd bring up some plans, alternatives, and get some direction from the board. When it comes to how we would apply this, we've looked into it. And for those that have already paid, because some of the customers have already paid their fees, we would provide a reimbursement to them in the form of a check. For those that have not paid, we would just provide a credit to the account. We would do our best to make sure that reimburse the appropriate person, because sometimes the tenants are the ones paying for the sewer service charge. So we would have to go and look for the agreements that are in place and try to decipher that out there. When it comes to a monetary amount, we think that 25% would be appropriate, which equates to approximately a month and a half. So getting into the plan, we had hoped the discussion would go that there would be a relief of approximately 25% of the sewer service charge for those agencies or for those businesses that are able to meet the criteria.
Okay, Director Wilkins, you got a comment?
Yeah, so I continue to be supportive of some form of rate relief program. I think the key is finding the right balance between how precise that is in terms of figuring out who has experienced what degree of hardship versus the administrative effort to sort that out. So the Tahoe City PUD put a rate relief program in place back last June or May actually of last year, and then we renewed it again recently. We recognize that there were some commercial customers that had been impacted more severely than others. We compared that against the administrative effort to sort that all out, and ultimately determined that the administrative effort was going to cost more than just providing more of an across-the-board type relief program. One of the things I'm curious about, LaRue, is how, because I think the sectors that are most obviously impacted, there's restaurants, there are, I think gyms have been, for the most part, closed down. And there's probably a couple of other use types that have been closed down for a number of months now. What I'm curious about is, to the extent that, for instance, we've got a rate code for restaurants. I think restaurants throughout the region have been affected in a similar fashion. Could we just come up with an across the board, okay, we're gonna rebate 50% of that revenue that we've probably already received for that time period they were closed down, which I think has been for the last 3 or 4 months. In my mind, we made a decision back in June. I think I was on the minority of that decision, but to not provide rate relief. So I think that ship has sailed. So in my mind, what we're talking about is this most recent period of shutdown. And I'm wondering if we can't look at a hybrid type rate relief program where we identify certain classes of customers who we will just automatically provide that rate relief to, where they don't, so we don't need all 300 restaurants within the TTSA service area or whatever that number is to go through an application process to get a reduction in their rates, and we don't have the administrative effort of staff to review every one of those. We just say, okay, those customers, it's automatic. And then it may be that we create an opportunity for folks that we may not pick up through that screening process, who have experienced similar hardship, to be able to go through an application process. So I think what I would suggest is, number one, I am supportive of a rate relief program, and number two, I'm concerned about the administrative effort, both for us and for our customers, to go through an application process for every single one of these. And if we can do, again, restaurants and maybe a couple of other use types, make it automatic for them, and then have a application process for any others that we may miss. I think that would be my preference.
Director Smeltzer?
Yes, I'm in favor of a rate relief program, just because for the businesses, they've been mandated by the state to do what they have to do, reduce their seating, etc., in restaurants.
Comment.
I think it's not out of line to do a rate relief. I think, they're talking about giving away ratepayers' money. It's really a case of, if you looked at it, a restaurant that totally shut down, I would look at that as a business going out of business, and they wouldn't be paying anything anyway. So, what's the difference? And I also think on the rates, I do like the idea of a blanket rate, but it would be hard to define everybody. You know, a restaurant's easy. I mean, the Wolfdale's in here where they're saying, okay, we're just doing outsourcing meals and we're only washing a few or half the pots and pans or something. That would be pretty easy to figure out. But I was at an optometrist business last week, and they had their bathroom shut down only for use by employees. So they're on a little different level. I mean, the guy that comes in as a customer, he's going to go home and pee or whatever. He's still going to have, you know, he's still going to have the same volume coming down the pipeline. So I don't see that they would qualify for a rate relief because there's no impact. But a restaurant, I can see it. And so I am in favor of rate relief. It's just how we do it. I like Dan's idea that I think we're getting into a can of worms. We just have to figure it out. We can do it. That's all.
Okay, so the direction, you know, I think that that we're all in favor of being sensitive to our ratepayers, especially our commercial people. It's just how we go about doing it, LaRue. And the one thing that I would be real hesitant of doing is creating an administrative nightmare for our staff. I think that LaRue, if you and the staff could come up with a recipe that would address the needs of our customers that are impacted and that do need relief, I would be in favor of doing my share to move that effort forward. However, I think that it's going to be up to you, LaRue, to discuss it with the billing and the accounting and the rest of the staff that would be directly impacted. And hopefully we can come up with a recipe that will meet the needs of our affected customers and at the same time not create a bureaucratic and administrative nightmare for our staff.
Understood. We can come back next month with a plan. I'll discuss with further staff to see their efforts needed to come up with a plan, whether it be a blanket or a automatic selective for businesses such as restaurants, and then combining it with a application process. We'll do that and come back next month with it for approval. Can we have the discussion on the amount of relief? Just to put in perspective, when we talked about in June, we were looking at a 25% relief amount, which equated to about $375,000. Again, that was the monetary value when we just blanketly applied it to everybody. Is the board interested in maintaining a 25% relief, or would you like to see that at a different percentage?
So
Any comment? Any board member? Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, so I like the idea of actually a higher percentage, but more focused on, because I think that 375,000 number, I think if we had applied that to all commercial customers, which would have included retail stores, grocery stores, et cetera, if we had done a 25% reduction, it would have amounted to a $375,000 revenue reduction to the agency. However, I think the direction we're headed in is, you know, grocery stores that have been open, retail stores that by and large have been open, and those commercial customers are not likely going to be included in this rate relief program. So I think if we have a more focused program that's focused on those business types that have been most severely impacted, I think we could provide a higher percentage of rate relief. And my supposition is that the total cost may be less than that 375 we were looking at last time. So I would be more in favor of something closer, more along the lines of like a 50% relief amount focused on those business sectors that were most directly impacted. And then I think the other thing we need to be thoughtful of is for what time period. You know, back in June, we decided not to provide rate relief at that time. So as I said before, I think that ship has sailed. By and large, over the summer, the restaurant sectors were open. And then we got into the fall and early winter months, and the restaurants had to close along with the gyms and a few of the other types. So, yeah, I don't know if it's like I'm feeling like, you know, November 1 or maybe December 1 would be the start date through, you know, through current. But I think that's the other question, is over what time period do we provide the rate relief? So from my perspective, I think something more like a 50% relief program focused on the sectors that are most directly impacted and that correlates to the time period that they've been most directly impacted. You know, I think, you know, last summer, folks, again, you had outdoor dining that was open. You had various degrees of indoor dining that was allowed. Yeah, I'm not necessarily looking at those time periods as needing to provide the relief. I'm looking at more November, December, January, February, and hopefully not too many months into the future before they can get back to business. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, we've got a pretty good dialogue and discussion from the directors. LaRue, you have a direction as far as how to proceed from the directors. I'd like to know if there's anybody from the public that wants to comment on this agenda item.
We do have some of these business owners present to make public comment. First, we have Noel Topol. I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. Mr. Topol, you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, it's Steve Topol, Noel Steven. My mom yells at me and calls me Noel, but you can call me Steve.
Sorry about that, Steve.
That's okay. Yes, I own, I just got through paying my TSA bill of $4,545 for 6 months for my restaurant. I pay for 303 seats at $15 per seat. And, you know, the issue is that for me is that I don't look at this as a gift of public funds by giving me a discount or giving me some type of relief. I look at it as a way of making my contribution to the TTSA consistent with what my use has been in the restaurant and based on the mandates of Governor Newsom. And when he says you don't seat inside, we don't seat inside. When he says you only have 25% seating inside, we've removed all these tables. We've done all the compliances with all the requirements for social distancing, and we ended up have lost 47 seats and 18 tables. So, but we're continuing to be paying for them, which is, I understand your situation. You have fixed costs and you have to take care of them. But this money that we're paying to you guys is coming not from the public, from meals served and all, and from the bar for people drinking. It's just coming out of my pocket and from my savings. And that's, I mean, I've grown up in Tahoe. I know what the problem is here. We have an up and down economy. Forget the pandemic. And so I try to save as much money as I can because I know in the off time, we're not going to have the business and we're going to need to feed the kitty. This pandemic is a one-time. This is something I've never seen before. I mean, I didn't grow up in World War II. I don't have any rationing to deal with or had to experience, but we need your help. And we're down significantly revenue-wise, at least to 50%. And it's been hurting. I own the building that I've owned it since 1974. I owned it with my family. I own it totally outright now with my sister, and we pay the bills. And so we need some help, and we need it fast. It'll help us a lot if you can reduce it down significantly over the course of this pandemic. Once we are able to seat people again and get our revenues back up again, then we're Jake. But right now we are really hurting and we need your help. And you guys are local people. You know what we're going through, and we would appreciate any help you can give us. And all my restaurant friends feel the same way. Thank you.
Steve, thanks. Appreciate your comment. I'm just curious, what I saw the letter that came from you and Douglas Dale. What is your sense in terms of our discussion on the magnitude of relief? And
Well, I'd like to see it kind of in my dream. I would like to see it correspond with the amount of if we're given 25% allowance to be inside, you know, with the social distancing and all the reduction in the seating that we've had to take care of, that, you know, that would be great. But that's not going to work for you guys. So I see some type of a hybrid of relief based on, you know, just come up with your best guess. I hate to see LaRue have to come up with some program. I think all you need to do is to come up with like the PUD did, and they're giving us a 50% relief automatically applied for 3 months. And they just picked they didn't ask me anything. I mean, I've been talking to them and they didn't ask me. So 3 months and that seems short. And I don't think 50% of the TTSA relief is necessary. 25, 30%, but for a longer period of time, maybe over the 6-month period, that really helps us a lot. Because like I said, I just paid 100% of my bill, and I pay for 303 seats, and I don't have anything close to that, you know. And I pay extra because I don't want to have to come back sometime in the future and ask you to reassess my business because I want to add more seating or I do an addition and I want to put more seats in. So I pay extra now. So that's my choice, but that's just how I do it. And but I say list some figure that's not outrageous, and 25% seems to be a good number. And if you could do that for the, you know, for the people who paid for this period of time from January through June, that would be fantastic. And give us credit or some type of a rebate, that would be terrific. Those who have it, they get some type of credit off their bill when they pay it. I think that would be fair. The longer, the better.
thanks. I appreciate getting your take on that. That helps.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any other business owners, if you're on the phone, you can hit *6 to raise your hand, or *9 to unmute yourself as well. And, or just hit the raise hand button. Okay, we have Johnny Rocher. Hopefully I'm saying that right as well. And he is the owner of Zaz Lakefront. Johnny, if you would go ahead and speak. Go ahead, Johnny.
Is he muted, Rochelle?
No. I think he has an older version here, but Johnny, I made you a panelist, so you should be okay to speak. Go ahead. Hello, Johnny. Johnny? I'm sorry, it did notify me that he had an older version. I'm not sure what is happening here, but.
Well, while we're waiting, and hopefully he can join us, LaRue, I was just did a quick check of our, you know, what TTSA's customer classes are.
Yeah.
And there's a number of them that are pretty easily identified as, you know, impacted industries. The restaurants are a specific class. Where it gets challenging, particularly in relation to Dan's comments of like gyms, is I don't know that, you know, those are just generally classified under plumbing fixture units. There are other commercial, and so identifying those is going to be a lot harder to kind of identify than ones that are specified by their actual customer class. So
You are correct. We do have a restaurant seat allocations. Those are easy to identify. We may have some other ones that we could do, like restaurants, bar seats, beauty shops, barber shops. Yes, when it comes to some of the other ones, it is under the general business fixture. I do not recommend that we reach out and find out exactly which one of those businesses are, because that will be overwhelming for staff. I think the appropriate thing to do is what Dan had stated, which is to easily identify those that we know were highly impacted, provide the relief, and then let the others be aware of the fact that they have to go through the process for an application. And I do think that's the method I'm going to submit next month. Again, I will discuss that with staff as well too. And I know Mr. Rosher isn't online. Well, he's online, but he can't speak. But what I will do is I'll reach out to him and maybe get his feedback as well, very similar to what we did for Mr. Topple.
And Mr. Topple would like to speak again. He's raised his hand. Go ahead, Mr. Topple.
Sorry, yeah, Mr. Topol. I'm sorry. I just wanted to bring this up. I forgot to bring it up. You know, when you want to, I think there's two different levels of restaurant seating, indoor and outdoor, and they're different. Since there's outdoor level, it's less than the indoor because that's 100% usable all year long, where your outdoor is limited to 5 or 6 months. And I think a suggestion would be that maybe since we're open only partially, everybody's been open partially for the restaurants, to assign a outdoor level pricing per seat as a way of mitigating the effect of the pandemic, with us being limited with this indoor seating. Some reduced level for all the seating would be a nice way to look at it. And it might be easy for staff to implement. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So with that, President Cox, I have direction. I can return next month with a proposal for the board to consider, where we would come up with a plan, whether it be a all-out credit to everybody or a selective all-out for some, and then an application process for the others. And I'll discuss with staff and Mr. Rosher and get his feedback on a potential percentage of a relief in over how many months. And I can bring that at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, any final closing comments on this board agenda item from any of the directors? Seeing none and hearing none, let's move on to the next item. The next item is a discussion related to retired health benefits and employees' contribution.
President Cox, thank you very much. This topic was brought up over the past months, and we apologize for the time it took to gather all the information and provide it to the board of directors. But Vicki LaFrana did a great job preparing the documents and providing some explanations on the retiree health benefits and employee pension contributions. And with that, I will hand it over to her. Thank you, Vicki.
Good morning again, President Cox and directors. For those following along our board packet, we are on pages 76 through 83. And the board recently requested a review, as LaRue mentioned, of retiree health benefits and the options for retirement for active employees as it relates to the employer and employee split of classic and pupper retirement. First, we will discuss the retiree health. And for the retiree health, there are 3 options which consist of either continuing to do the same as we are right now, which we will talk about in a minute, a vesting schedule, and a PEMCA minimum option. So currently, TTSA has a 1987 resolution on file with CalPERS that offers retirees what is referred to as an unequal contribution amount, which is paid toward or paid by TTSA toward the retiree health plan enrollment. Over the years since 1987, this unequal contribution amount has become the same or nearly the same for all health plans. This means that the contribution offered toward the health plan of choice to retirees is paid at 100% or nearly 100% by TTSA. CalPERS offers several health plans to retirees, and eligibility for each health plan is offered is determined by the physical zip code of the retiree. Depending on the chosen plan and the tier level of the retiree and their family, the plan is paid at 100% by TTSA in most cases. Currently, retiree health eligibility is based on the following minimum requirements to retire as set forth by CalPERS. And there are 3 criteria, which is 5 years of CalPERS retirement service credit. And this can be achieved either at TTSA, at a different agency, or a combination of the 2. Second criteria is eligible to retire, which the definition of that by CalPERS is that you're at least 50 years of age for Classic members and 52 years of age for PEPRA members. And the third criteria would be to retire from TTSA within 120 days from separation of employment. So that's the current criteria, or the current resolution that we have on file. Another option would be a vesting schedule. So the agency may adopt a vesting schedule as set forth per Government Code 22893, which sets the vesting schedule and the rules and regulations of implementation, and that is set through CalPERS. If the agency adopts the schedule, the agency cannot make any special provisions or changes, and rather are bound by the rules set forth by CalPERS. To be eligible for retiree health benefits within the vesting schedule, the minimum requirements for retirement must be met as follows. And there are 4 criteria in this case. The first one being you must serve a minimum of 10 years of combined service at a CalPERS agency. Number 2, must serve a minimum of 5 years of service out of that 10 years at TTSA. Number 3, must be eligible for retirement. And again, the eligibility is either 50 years of age for Classic members or 52 for PEPRA members. And the 4th piece is that you retire from TTSA within 120 days from separation of employment. The vesting schedule is based on combined CalPERS years of service and defines the percentage of employer contribution to the retiree health plan based on the service. CalPERS would administer the vesting schedule and the retiree health plan. The employer contribution amount is set by CalPERS and is subject to change annually. If this plan is chosen, all current retirees and current employees will be subject to the current plan. So that's the first plan we talked about. And then any future employees will be subject to the vesting schedule that I just spoke about. And then the third option would be the PEMCA minimum. And the agency may adopt a PEMCA minimum plan that would apply a flat rate amount toward the employer contribution for the employee retirement health benefits, regardless of the plan and regardless of the tier level chosen by the retiree. So the minimum requirements for eligibility under this option are two requirements. Must be eligible for retirement, meaning the 50 years for Classic, 50 years of age for Classic members, and 52 years of age for PEPRA members, and must retire from TTSA within 120 days of employment, of separation from employment. There is no requirement for years of service at TTSA, and the flat fee amount is based on the amount set forth by CalPERS annually and typically increases by a few percentage points. Currently, the PEMCA minimum amount is $143 per month. The PEMCA minimum plan does not differentiate between current retirees and future retirees. If this plan is chosen, upon implementation, all current retirees will begin receiving $143 per month toward their retiree health benefits. The agency would have to administer any internal program that the board may decide to offer to offset the difference in the PEMCA minimum amount and the actual plan amount, which again currently is approximately 100% paid by employer. And currently the agency has 53 retirees on the retiree health plan, and the monthly cost to TTSA is $55,807.79. So on this part for the retiree health, are there any questions or comments on that before I move on to the next section?
I got a question, Vicki. With regards to all three programs, we're not taking all of those do not take away from the existing employees' retirement plan, correct?
That would be a board decision. So the current plan, no, it wouldn't take away anything from
Right.
existing employees or retirees. The vesting schedule would, any existing retiree and existing employee would be, CalPERS doesn't call it grandfathered, but essentially it's a grandfathering in to the current plan if we chose the vesting schedule. If we went to the PEMCA minimum, then the board would have to make a decision of whether they wanted to put forth some kind of additional plan beyond the $143 per month that would be provided to current retirees as well as current employees when they retire, as well as future employees.
Yeah, I've always said that we can't take anything existing away from an employee that he has now. What we're looking at is reducing the long-term cost to TTSA, for new employees coming in. And with that, because the cost, medical costs and everything keep going up, those numbers are big. And even with the existing situation, somebody can come in at, say, 55 years old and work 5 years or 2 years and be covered for lifetime medical benefits that TTSA is responsible for. And I think we need to take a look at this, and we need to revamp this.
If I may, President Cox, Lane, to add to that, under the two options, other than maintaining what we have, we do have the ability to maintain the existing benefits for current staff and current retirees. And correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, what she's referring to is we would have to supplement, if the PEMCA option was decided, we would have to supplement the difference to make sure that we would make staff whole, if I could use that word, to ensure that they maintain their 100% support from the agency. So
Okay.
Under the vesting option one, the grandfather clause does protect current retirees and current employees. Under the PEMCA option, it doesn't discriminate between current and new. However, we as an agency can address that internally to ensure that we meet the desires of maintaining it for staff. I just want to provide clarification on that.
Okay, under that scenario, I would encourage the board that be included in option 3. If we just did decide to go to option 3 there, that we would make up the difference to the current employees.
Okay, Blake, any comments?
Nice memo, Vicki. Thank you for doing this. I was heartened to hear that with the opportunity to move into a vesting program, that CalPERS would allow us to maintain those benefits. As Lane said, I would be hard pressed to, I would oppose changing the rules on existing employees and particularly existing retirees. And so the ability to grandfather in those folks that we've made this commitment to, but make a change to provide what I think is still a really generous retiree health benefit program that rewards long-term TTSA employees is a great way to go. And so I appreciate you bringing this forward. And I didn't really have any additional comments.
Okay, Dan?
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, I'd echo Blake's comments. One, I guess one question, Vicki. Did you finish your presentation? Because you stopped midstream, asked if there was any questions on this portion of it. Did you have more that you wanted to offer us?
Yes, but the next part is related to the retirement plan and the employer-employee split on Classic and Pepper members. So different topic, but all within the same agenda.
Okay. So I'm supportive of the agency moving to a vesting schedule for future employees. I think a variation on the one that was presented in the staff report, and this is a detail, but for me, an important one. It looks like what we're saying in this, it looks like the option that was presented in the staff report, option 1, it identifies the number of years of PERS service, and the more years that you have, the higher percentage vested you are, which is different than the number of years of agency experience. So as I understand this draft vesting schedule, as long as you've worked at, so let's say we've got someone who has worked 15 years at another PERS agency, takes a job with TTSA, works for us for 5 years. That gives them 20 years of PERS experience, or of PERS service, but only 5 years of TTSA service. As I understand the current vesting schedule, that person would still be eligible for 100% retiree health benefit from TTSA, which to me feels too rich of a benefit for an employee that in theory had only worked for us for 5 years. I think the concept is if we're trying to reward long tenure at the agency and the benefits that come along with that to the agency, then we want to kind of change that schedule a bit. And I'd be okay with, we also want to make it attractive for employees to come from other public agencies, potentially to, move to TTSA. But I could see where, TTSA may effectively agree to transfer in up to 5 years of PERS service for purposes of this retirement from another public agency, but no more than that, right? So if you come from another public agency, let's say you've worked there for 10 years, for purposes of the TTSA vesting schedule, you would max out at 5 years, and then the rest of your time would have to have been earned at TTSA. Is it possible to do that, or is there some kind of a weird PERS rule that would prohibit that?
Yeah, it is. That was very clear through CalPERS in that if we adopted the vesting schedule, we would have to adhere to the rules that they have established. And that schedule is what they have established. They have also established the must serve a minimum of 10 years combined at a CalPERS agency, a minimum of 5 years at TTSA, the eligibility requirements, and they have also established the dollar amount that would be contributed toward retiree only, retiree plus one, and retiree plus two or more. So we would have to adhere to their set of rules in order to adopt that vesting schedule.
So this vesting schedule is like a standard vesting schedule that CalPERS has, and you cannot customize it. So if we wanted to do something custom, what we would have to do is go to the PEMCA minimum and then develop some kind of a backfill program on top of that.
That is correct. However, all employees, all retirees would be subject to the PEMCA minimum amount, regardless of whatever rules we put in place. But beyond the PEMCA minimum, we could establish a set of rules. TTSA would have to administer all of that, whereas with the vesting schedule, CalPERS would administer that. But again, we can't make any changes. So yes, what you said is accurate.
Okay.
I think the PEMCA, is probably the easiest one to administer outside of making those adjustments with the current retirees and the ones that are in the system. As I say, I've been on this for a long time because I just feel it's necessary fiduciary responsibility of us directors. I mean, we're looking down the line here. That number does not go down. All that number does is keep running up every single year. And we need to take some responsibility in how to curb that number.
Do you mind if I interject just a bit? I'm Mona Radulovich from Wiley Price and Radulovich. And I think there may be some other ways to tailor the vesting, because I have been involved with other clients that have done that. So this 5 years at TTSA actually sounds low compared to what I've seen at some other agencies. So I think it is worth exploring. I know CalPERS can be very rigid, but I think it is worth exploring. If you're worried about that being too generous, that maybe that is something that can be explored further with CalPERS and our ways to achieve that. Because as you said, it's a very generous benefit, and it is hard to maintain moving forward, especially when you already have 55 people within that pool, plus your existing employees that may in the near future be eligible to receive it.
Okay, David, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I really struggled with this, and I had to call Vicki yesterday just to get through some of it. But one question is, when a person comes from, say, 15 years at another agency, but they're covered by CalPERS, do they bring any of that, any health benefit money with them when they leave the other agency? Is there any contribution from the former agency that they were with? None. Okay. And that $55,879 per month is going to be a big number in 10 years, I'm thinking. Is that true?
I would imagine that it would become much larger as we add additional retirees to the plan. Definitely.
Thank you.
Of course, there would always be, I guess, just through time, some retirees dropping off also, but yeah, mostly additions, I would imagine.
So just to jump in here, I think I'm hearing the vesting sounds good, but I like this twist that Mona has provided. So I don't know, Vicki, whether you can work with Mona to see if that's, I don't like the idea of, I think the PEMCA I feel like the PEMCA minimum is not rich enough and creates a tremendous administrative burden to make up the difference for the grandfather folks. And so I'm leaning towards the vesting program, but if there is an option to simply increase the minimum years of service at our agency to 10 as opposed to 5, I would prefer that over the 5-year minimum. So we don't end up in the scenario Dan laid out where someone only works 5 years but has 15 somewhere else and gets 100%. Under that scenario, they'd have to work at least 10 years to start to get vesting with the agency. So But I'm just not familiar with the rules surrounding CalPERS and these vesting programs. But
It sounds like that with the employee, say like we're hiring an employee that has that is 55 years old, or it's going to retire in 5 years. Say he's 56, as opposed to there's two applicants. There's one at 30 and there's one at 55. We're looking at a significant overall cost in that employee that's 56. And you get into age discrimination again, and it just because the way this thing works is the last employer pays the fee. Whether the guy worked for 25 years with another agency, it doesn't matter. You had the last 4 years at TTSA is responsible. And what I'm hearing under current law, that there's nothing we can do about that. Mona, you did talk to say we can alter something within the with those requirements.
I am hopeful because I know I've worked with other agencies that have 10 years of service at the agency in order to qualify for the retiree medical. How they've done that with CalPERS, I'm not sure. But that's what I think should be explored, to see whether there is a way to increase that vesting schedule, at least for service at TTSA.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dan.
I have a question. It's probably either for Vicky or Mona. The interaction between Medicare and PERS retirement healthcare. So how does that work? Because at some point, a retired employee becomes eligible for Medicare, and at that point in time, does the PERS retirement healthcare cease to need to be provided, or is the rate significantly lower because Medicare is primary and the PERS retirement is secondary? How does that work?
Do you know, Vicki?
I believe so. To the best of my knowledge, Dan, well, this is definitely known to me, is that PERS does offer different rates for Medicare eligible employees and dependents. And there's different ways they look at it, whether the employee or the retiree is Medicare eligible versus whether their dependent is Medicare eligible, and what rates they may pay based on that. But it is my understanding that once an employee or the retiree becomes Medicare eligible, then Medicare becomes their primary, the CalPERS plan becomes their secondary, and the rates are less, yes. How much less, I would have to look at the numbers to remember, but I think they are somewhat significant.
So the CalPERS insurance for a retired employee would remain in place, or it currently does remain in place until the death of that person. The amount may be reduced at the time the person becomes eligible for Medicare, but given that the current benefit is for, it basically goes through the retiree's entire lifespan. So that means that folks would be, the agency will be paying for retiree healthcare until the death of an employee.
That could absolutely be the case, and probably is the case with most retirees, I would imagine, yes.
Just one other thing. I want to revert back to what you said, Blake, as far as being burdensome with the PEMCA. I think once those percentages and everything are calculated in there, it wouldn't be that big of an issue, especially when you look at the cost savings down the road what this district would be paying. It would be well worth it. So
I have another curiosity. I think it's obvious to me, at least, that if we went to the PEMCA minimum for all new employees, that's going to be the least expensive option for TTSA in the long run. And that the vesting schedule would be kind of in the middle, and our current program would be the most expensive. Is there any ability to work with PERS to get, is there any way to calculate the relative cost of the PEMCA minimum program versus the vesting schedule over time? Is that something PERS can help us with, so we can understand what the difference is between these numbers at a broad level?
So LaRue and I both spoke with CalPERS on the issue, and I would say, to answer your question, to the best of my abilities, I did not get the impression from them that they could or would or have the ability to do something like that. We did try to create our own schedules just to try to show what it might look like, and that is included in the at the end of the memo included in the board packet. It's page 4 of the first memo that goes beyond the agenda item, and I can actual page packet if you'd like. But just one technicality in something you just said, Dan, and that is that if the agency chooses the PEMCA minimum, it's not just for future employees, it's for all employees and all retirees. It would immediately apply to all of them. So let's see, go into the board packet, if I can open that here real quick.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing there, Vicki, is it shows an option 1 with the vesting schedule and an option 2 of the PEMCA minimum. So I think you said currently we're paying around $50,000 per month for our existing retirees. What this vesting schedule shows is that monthly contribution would be more like $22,000 under the vesting schedule, or $7,000 a month under the PEMCA minimum. Now, I think if we were to go to the vesting schedule, our cost isn't automatically going to drop down to the $22,000. It may take 30 years. It should stop increasing as rapidly as it is, but it might actually increase for some period of time, because if we vest all of our existing employees in the current program, then we've got all the existing employees that would become eligible for retiree health benefits. And it's likely that we may still see another 10 years of increased cost for employee retirement before we start to see a decrease as a result of the vesting schedule. But then, so adopting this vesting schedule wouldn't really do anything today. It would be long-term in terms of the cost reductions to the agency.
I think we're all looking at the long-term cost, because even if we did the PEMCA that shows 7,000, we as a board, I think, would make everybody whole. It's going to bring it back up to that number. It's just that the new people coming in would be able, would have less of a TTSA contribution long-term. And so, under that scenario with the PEMCA, that 7,200, that's irrelevant, because I think everybody on the board here agrees we have to make the current staff and the retired staff whole, because we've already promised that. So we're looking at, there's no real difference on any one of these financially right now. It's a long-term effect for the employees that we start hiring.
Right.
That's what we got to look at. I mean, it's not we're not going to eliminate that amount of money right away.
Yeah, and I should add in, if you were looking at making the change for people that work there right now, that would require further legal analysis because it is an issue fraught with concerns. If you're going to change pension benefits and or even retiree medical benefits for people that are already there under an existing program, it's a much more complicated matter.
Mona, if we're going to make them whole, I mean, if we're not going to change their cost, at all, is that, I mean, if we went to the PEMCA, would we have a legal, I mean, would there be any difference with the employees? Because if we, we're stating that we're going to make them whole, I mean, what's the difference?
Right, you're going to have that cost for your existing employees in terms of, to the extent that you want to keep them at receiving 100% of their retiree medical, you would need to put in a different, some other plan in place or policy in place, either through CalPERS if they'll allow you or otherwise, to make up that difference. So it's probably not going to yield a cost savings for people that you've hired now. A lot of places, when they're looking at changing retiree medical or other pension benefits, they do it for new hires and keep the existing situation for your existing people based upon a variety of legal theories that you may have heard about. There's this notion that there's vested pension benefits, and we all were hoping to get further clarification from the California Supreme Court about that because there were some recent challenges and it wasn't as clear as people were hoping. So it's generally advisable, if you can, to keep existing people as is and then make your changes moving forward. It's a little bit slower, to get the cost savings, but at least you've made some movement towards doing that.
So
Go ahead, Blake.
LaRue and Vicki, good job. This has been, I think, a hot topic for us for a while. I think we're all in agreement that the existing benefit for retiree health is something we want to get off of. I'm not sure. I get a little sense from Lane that perhaps PEMCA is something that he's interested in. I think Dan and I both expressed an interest in the vesting, potentially looking at the option Mona's presented. Do you guys need more direction from us at this point? Do you need us to, as a group, I know we're not taking actual action, that'd be at a future board meeting, but I think there's some timeliness to it with the number of recruitments you have. I don't know whether, people that you go through the recruitment process are subject to the rules of the district. I don't want to drag this out too much because every new employee that's subject to the current system is, an additional burden. And I think there's a desire for the board to change this for new hires. So what can we do to get you guys clear direction to bring this back hopefully next month?
Yeah, the takeaway I have right now is that we should go back and have a discussion with the CalPERS and see if they are flexible. The conversations Vicki and I had with the individual there did seem they were quite rigid. And they didn't give us very many options, but we're more than willing to go back and have that discussion and take into account the options of carrying over so many vested years from another agency or how many years we need to have here. We can come back with that next month and also bring back PEMCA again to see what options and potential benefits we could do to make staff whole under those scenarios. So right now, I think we have enough discussion and direction for us to come back next month, see what flexibility CalPERS has and represent to you two options again, and then have a further discussion at that point. As it pertains to current staff that we're recruiting right now, we are going to recruit as needed. So depending on how long this takes, I don't think we should postpone recruitment simply because of this discussion, because this discussion may take many months to finalize within the board, and then a couple more months to implement with CalPERS alone. So I think there's quite a few months on the horizon for that.
Well, I'd sure like that at the next month meeting, more clarity on PEMCA and see what we can do with regards to the other option. But I want action. I mean, I think we should put those, give us more. We do need more information. We can't make a decision on it at this point, because if we can find the different variables to make something else work, that's great. But we need to, it's going to take 2 months beyond the board action anyway to implement. And I do agree with you, General Manager Griffin, that we're not going to be postponing any hires, but we do need to take this and get something done. I mean, I've been bringing it up for the last 6 or 7 months, and it's time to take action. So if we can have some clarity and we can have it as an possible action item next month, I would concur with going forward in that fashion.
It seems to me that there may be a way with respect to people that you're in the process perhaps of hiring over the next month to let them know that that they are not entitled to the existing retiree medical program and that it's currently being changed. And that they'll be subject to whatever is adopted by the board. What you want to get away from is promising them that they're under the existing one. So there may be ways that we can work on that to address that concern. And the other thing I wanted to say is I do find CalPERS can be very rigid in terms of what they offer, and when I said that other places have different vesting schedules, it could very well be that they have decided not to offer their retiree medical benefits through CalPERS. They may be doing it separately. And that may be an option that you want to consider. Again, it's a cost analysis that gets involved in it.
Yeah.
We will try to come back with an action item. I don't know if that's really going to be possible, Lane, since we still have some scenarios and other questions pending that we need to follow up on, but we'll do our best to come back with that, but we'll definitely come back with more clarity.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to comment about fairness. When you're putting all this together, a new hire, I mean, the deal's a deal. You sign on for whatever the deal is, pay and retirement. But as a new hire, and you're working along somebody that's a classic, and you're looking at what they're going to come away with after they've worked at TTSA, I think there's an issue there of fairness that we have to look at too. That so that new hire isn't disgruntled at some point over pensions and healthcare.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yeah.
So LaRue, you have your direction of where you're going to proceed for next month's agenda?
Yes, regarding the retiree health benefits, I do, sir.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments in regards to this agenda item, I'd like to move on to...
Dale?
We do have a public comment. We have Pippin Mater would like to make a public comment on this item.
Okay, go ahead, Pippin.
Before we proceed, President Cox, there's also the other second half of this agenda item, which is the employee pension contribution. So I didn't know if you wanted to wait until you take public comment after the whole agenda item is discussed by the board, or did you want to keep them split up? It's your decision, sir. Your choice.
We can go ahead and take Pippin's contribution right now.
Okay. Go ahead, Pippin.
Great, thank you guys. Thank you, Dale. I will say that I as you guys know, I've brought this topic up a couple of times, and I do fairly strongly feel as a member of the public that option 2 is sort of the most fair, right? That having some kind of vesting schedule, honestly, that's how my work works. I think it's a reasonable thing to do. And that I am a little less, while I generally agree with Lane and Blake's argument that, existing members it does seem like a fairly that existing employees get the benefit no matter what. They're kind of grandfathered in. That is surprisingly expensive for the agency in the short term. And I will point out that one of the reasons that these costs are so high is because of the large number of early retirements that have happened. And as Dan correctly brought up, that once Medicare kicks in, then that's a much lower cost. But because of the high turnover, a lot of people have retired as early as they can. And that's part of the reason that you're seeing, employees retire at 50 and they don't get Medicare until they're 62 or 65 or whatever. That's a lot of years that the agency's on the hook left paying for that. And so I just kind of point that out. I'll also point out that as relates to the 5 years of CalPERS of TTSA experience versus the vesting schedule based on CalPERS experience, that is TTSA both wins and loses at that. And so that's sort of fair, right? You may have employees that leave later in their careers, and you have, that then another agency is on the hook for paying for their medical. So it's not just a one-way street there. And then finally, I really do agree with David. I think that he's spot on about that, about the fairness part, and that working alongside employees that are doing the same job and getting much different benefits can sometimes be challenging, and if there's a way to mitigate that, that'd be valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all I have, Director Cox. We can move on to the next subject.
Okay, as far as for moving on to the next agenda item.
Same item for Vicky, just a different portion of that item.
Second half.
Let's go ahead and start.
Okay, so the second half of this agenda item relates to the retirement system, being Classic and PEPRA retirement system. So CalPERS retirement system has two main employee retirement plans known as Classic and PEPRA. And generally speaking, employees that join the CalPERS retirement system prior to 2013 are Classic members, and employees that joined in 2013 and after are generally PEPRA employees. And there are variables that can change those definitions, but generally speaking, that is accurate. So TTSA currently has a resolution on file with CalPERS that states that the employer will pay 100% of the employee share of Classic retirement. And to explain what this means, with both Classic and PEPRA retirement, there is a percentage of salary that is paid toward the employee's retirement. With each percentage, there is an employer split and an employee split of the full percentage amount. For Classic members, the percentage is approximately 22.523% total, of which 14.523% is employer paid and 8% is employee paid. However, in this case for Classic members, the employee portion is also paid by the employer. And then for PEPRA, this percentage is approximately 15.097% total, of which 7.847% is employer paid and 7.25% is employee paid. With Classic membership, the employee may choose whether to pay the employee portion, and with PEPRA membership, the employer may not choose whether to pay the employee portion. So as indicated, TTSA currently pays the employee share of Classic membership, which equates to approximately $22,448 per month for the 29 Classic employees at TTSA. Moving forward, if the agency chooses to change this, there are three options. So first option is continue to do what we already do, which is what I just described. Option number two is TTSA may adopt a resolution for employer paid member contribution that requires new Classic employees hired after a certain date to pay their own employee share of Classic retirement. And then a third option is that TTSA may adopt a resolution for employer paid member contribution that requires all Classic employees, current and future, to pay their own employee share of Classic retirement. So any questions based on that information?
Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, Vicky. So any new employee who's not a current member of PERS would be in the PEPRA class. So the only new Classic employees would be an employee who's an existing PERS member at another entity that elects to take a job at TTSA. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So the likelihood of having a whole lot of new Classic employees is not great. We may get a few, but I think the fact that we've got 17 PEPRA employees since PEPRA was created about 4 or 5 years ago is a pretty good indicator that we're not likely to have a whole lot of new Classic employees.
I actually went back into 2018, I believe, and even going back farther or coming more current, it really didn't seem to make a difference that the number of employees hired seemed to be a split between Classic and PEPRA employees. So I guess what I'm trying to say is whether I use really current data or went back, and it didn't really matter how far I went back. It seemed to be a pretty even split of hiring Classic versus PEPRA employees.
Okay,
I
thanks.
should also point out that it may be that somebody is coming from another agency that has a different retirement plan other than CalPERS, but CalPERS might recognize it. There's a way to do that under the law, and then they become Classic members also. So it's kind of it is a little bit of a complicated formula in terms of who's Classic and who's not. It seems that a lot of the times if you do have people moving over from other public agencies, which could very well be typical of what TTSA experiences, they could possibly fall within the Classic.
Okay.
But going forward, there's not going to be a lot from this date forward. That's what I think Dan was asking, is that it's not going to be a lot of people. Doesn't sound like.
I guess it depends on how much hiring you're doing.
Correct.
I think Vicky suggested it's been about a 50-50 mix over the last 5 years, and that'll probably trend downward as time goes on and people retire and whatnot. But
again, this is similar to the health benefits where through time, I think eventually everybody will be a PEPRA employee. But it's just making the determination if the board wants to make any changes as it was requested to bring this to their attention for discussion.
yeah, so this is an interesting one for me. If PEPRA didn't exist, I'd be much more strongly inclined to basically transition TTSA away from paying the employee's share of PERS. Yeah, I think public agencies paying both the employee and the employer's share of PERS was relatively commonplace about 10 years ago. And I think with the economic recession and rising pension costs that occurred a little less than a decade ago, a lot of public agencies made a transition where they no longer paid the employee's share of PERS. And they made that happen through labor negotiations at that time. And then what happened was the PEPRA the kind of the PERS overhaul occurred at the state level, where they basically said, hey, it's no longer even an option. I mean, for the most part, for public employers to pay the employee share of PERS for new employees. So the state basically took a very affirmative action to help deal with this issue. So I think the question in my mind is, should we as TTSA at this point try to deal with this issue in one of two ways? One would be to look at any new Classic employees and just say new Classic employees will be expected to pay the employee's share of PERS, make that change and call it good. The other option is to make that change and to look at some kind of a phase out of TTSA paying existing employees employee share of PERS. And I think in my mind, I'm definitely supportive of new Classic employees paying the employee's share of PERS. The question in my mind is whether or not for existing employees, we should look at making that transition. If we did look at making that transition with existing employees, there'd be another question in my mind of should we be looking at offsetting some of that change in their compensation, right? So I know when, which then potentially becomes more of a net sum zero game and may not provide a lot of monetary benefit to the agency. So other than the optics of the agency continuing to be, I think, in a minority of paying the employee share. So anyway, those are some thoughts I have. I'll stop there and maybe add some more comments later.
If I could add to that, Dan, what Dan was referring to is that when the compensation and classification study was performed, the employee share was taken into account when the 75th percentile was assigned. So that net zero he's referring to is that if we were to start current existing staff to contribute their 8% contribution, the expectation would be that there would be an increase 8% elsewhere, probably in the form of a salary. I believe that's what you were stating, Dan.
Yeah, that would be an option, which effectively keeps the employee whole. It might make them more than whole because it would actually increase their retirement because it would give them a higher base year. Anyway, I'll stop there.
So staff's recommendation is if the board does want to make a change, the change should be for new Classic employees as they come in. Those that are PEPRA are going to be PEPRA. Those that are going to come in, we can make sure that we assign a calendar date, and anything after that, even though they may have reciprocity through CalPERS, they would not be subject to the subsidy from the agency providing the 8% share. And we could do that in the form of a resolution, I do believe, but if that's the action that the board wants, we could bring that back next month for your consideration.
Good.
Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds good. I mean, we are creating, going back to David's comment about, equity. Now we've got a third tier of employees there. You have your PEPRA. I know that there's, not issues, but inequity between PEPRA and Classics. And now you're going to have an inequity between PEPRA, new Classics, and old Classics. But I do think it makes sense. And, following our sort of logic we had with the retiree health of not taking away benefits that were given to employees. I think making the change for new hires of Classics makes sense. And, I think we can have I don't know that you have to immediately tie in a transition of the existing Classic employees along Dan's thoughts of, some transition plan. They don't have to happen at the exact same time if that's a direction the board was leaning towards. At this point, I think I wouldn't want to delay again with the hiring going on, changing the rules for new hires, new classic hires. And so I would support that plan.
All right, and we have direction.
Okay.
Good. I got one other comment with regards to Dave. I mean, our, board, we're looking at an extremely fantastic benefit package that we offer our employees. I feel we're the Cadillac of any of the public utility districts up here as far as our benefit package. And, it's always been good. But you're also, we're sitting in here, our fiduciary responsibility is to the public too. And how many of those, I mean, us all being private employers, I doubt any one of us gives a lifetime medical benefits. We got to look to the people that we're serving also. That's, on the fairness, just on the fairness end, Dave. So that's just what I want to comment.
Okay, we do have another public comment, Director Cox, if you wanted to take that once the board is complete.
No further questions or comments from the board at this time? Seeing none and hearing none. Go ahead, Rochelle.
Okay, Mr. Mader, if you would like to go ahead.
Thank you. I would just encourage you to get input from the employees. I know there's been a lot of discussion here, but I haven't heard any of the actual employees discuss this. And I think that that'd be something that they'd probably be really interested in, including the fairness component of it. And without beating a dead horse too badly, this would be a great situation for a union representative to help convey the employee's opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mader.
Okay, if no further discussion on this agenda item, I'd like to move on to item V4, the presentation of the annual financial audit for fiscal year 2019-2020.
I think LaRue had a comment.
President Cox, if I can refer back to the last item we had there, I did send an email out to staff encouraging them to attend this discussion topic simply because it would pertain to them and there is high interest in it. They are here for public comment, and I welcome that they provide it if you would like to open it up to others to provide comment, specifically staff I'm referring to.
Yes, I do see there are a lot of staff in attendance today if they wanted to provide any comment.
Let's go ahead, Rochelle.
Staff, I do see 26 people in attendance and a majority of them are staff. If you would like to make any comment on this item, please raise your hand to do so at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to make any comments on this item. You're more than welcome to keep your screen blank. We won't see your face, just your voice. You're welcome to make any comment you'd like. And I do have a taker, Mr. Aaron Carlson. Go ahead, sir.
I'd just like to acknowledge that Mr. Griffin did send out an email to all staff, and staff have had the opportunity to voice our opinions to Mr. Griffin, and I feel that the process is fair, and like to thank management for their open transparency on this item.
Thank you, Aaron. And if anyone else would like to make a comment on this item, please feel free to raise your hand to make a comment and I will call on you. Okay, I do not see anyone raising their hands. We can go ahead and move forward, President Cox.
Okay, let's move on to the presentation of the annual financial audit for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Thank you, President Cox. The fiscal audit is completed for fiscal year 2019-2020. We have Ms. Vera Chris and Ron Lay here from Demore, Hamrick, and Schneider to provide a presentation on their findings and the financial statements. With that, I will hand it over to you, Rochelle, to, I believe, provide them control for the presentation.
Yes, I will. I'm promoting them to panelists right now. Just a moment here. Vera, are you there? Can you hear me? And Michelle?
I'm here.
Okay, I have Vera and her assistant as well. And let me go ahead and get Ron in there. Okay, Vera, I did give you permissions so you can have access to the screen. Can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes.
Right, looks like she is in here more than once. So I'm just gonna make sure I got her in there. Vera? Michelle, have you heard from her?
No, I
Here
have
she
not.
is.
Okay. Vera, oh, hi. Okay, we can see you but not hear you. So maybe you probably have to allow your audio. If you tap on your screen and allow computer audio. And I'm going to make you the co-host so you can take over here. Sorry for the delay, guys. Okay, here we go. Ask to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So what we wanted to do is to turn the audio off on our computer, and we are on our phone audience.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, which phone line are you on? 360-916. 916, I believe. So I'm gonna unmute. Can you do *6 or *9 on your phone so we can unmute? There you go. Okay.
Hello? Do you hear us now?
All right. I can hear you now. Great.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. So now we have your audio on the telephone and you have permissions on the screen to share your screen for the financial statements.
All right. Okay. And I was going to do the run the screen. Do we have, you got Vera?
You've been promoted to panelist.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I believe I also made you a co-host so you could share your screen.
There we go. Okay. And I'm right here. Let's start video. There we go. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. My name is Vera Kiss, and I'm here with Ron Lay presenting the result of our 2020, June 30, 2020 audit. I will be presenting 4 documents today. The first one is the independent auditor's report with the financial statements. The second one is a governance letter, which is our required communication to the board. We're also presenting a separate internal control communication letter. And the fourth document is a separate agreed upon procedure report on the appropriation limit calculation. So at first I would like to go through the independent auditor's report and the financial statement highlights. If I could draw your attention to the auditor's report on pages 3 and 4. This report reflects our, I'm sorry,
Vera, are you able to share your screen to show those documents also?
Oh.
I'm actually sharing my screen. Are you seeing that? It says my.
It's all right, I can do that.
I do see it on my end.
Yeah, I'm seeing it as well.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Sorry about that. Got it. Okay.
So the independent auditor's report reflects our opinion on the financial statements. We are happy to report that our opinion is unmodified, otherwise known as a clean opinion, which means that the financial statements present fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The second paragraph on page 3 addresses management's responsibilities, which is the preparation and the fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with general accepted accounting principles. The third paragraph addresses the auditor's responsibility, which is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on our audit performed. As part of our audit, we consider the agency's internal controls as well that are relevant to the agency's preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the internal controls. So accordingly, we did not express such opinion. I would like to emphasize on page 4 the other matters paragraph, which is required by the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and this is included the management's discussion and analysis on pages 5 through 9, and also the required supplementary information in the back of the report on pages 47 to 50 on the pension and the post-employment benefit plans. We applied certain limited procedures to the required supplementary information, but we do not express an opinion on it. On pages 52 and 53, you can find the supplementary information on budget to actual analysis. This information has been subjected to limited audit procedures, and in our opinion, the supplementary information is fairly stated in all material respects in relation to the basic financial statements as a whole. So as I mentioned, on pages 5 through 9, you can find management's discussion and analysis, which is again required by the GASB, and it provides an overview of the agency's financial activities. On page 10 is where the basic financial statements start. On pages 10 and 11 are the statements of net position, otherwise known as the balance sheet, which shows the agency's assets, deferred outflows, liabilities, deferred inflows, and net position. Just would like to highlight the key variances from prior year to current year. You know, as you can see on the cash and cash equivalents, overall between the unrestricted and restricted cash and cash equivalents, there was an approximately $6 million decrease. And probably the best way to see what caused this decrease in the cash, I would switch to page 13 to the statement of cash flows. So as you can see, the statement of cash flows have 4 sections: cash flows from operating activities, cash flows from non-capital financing activities, cash flows from capital and related financing activities, and cash flows from investing activities. So if you look at the subtotals on these sections, you see a $5 million usage by cash in the operating section, offset by a $4 million cash provided by the non-capital financing, and down approximately $1 million provided by investing activities, which ultimately almost zero out the cash inflows, outflows. So the $6 million decrease, if you look at the cash flows from capital and related financing activities, you can see there what the components, major components are of that cash used. And really the main components of this was the double principal payment that the agency paid this year, one for the loan before the loan was paid off in February. There was a normal principal payment paid back in October of nearly $2.6 million. And also when the refunding bonds were issued, the trustee required the first principal payment to be transferred prior to June 30. So that $2.18 million that you see principal payment on bonds was actually made just prior to year end, causing a double principal payment on the long-term debt. And then there was an acquisition of capital asset of $2 million in this section. So going back to the balance sheet on page 10, that ultimately what caused the $6 million decrease in cash. And you can see under the restricted assets section, the cash and cash equivalent decreased by approximately $4.5 million. And that's due to the fact that the loan agreement required in the past to have a restricted account for the cash related to the loan, but Fund 4, because the loan was paid off, was moved to an unrestricted cash account as of June 30, 2020, where we still had a balance under that Fund 4 at year end. However, the loan was non-existent, therefore it did not need to be under the restricted category. And then under the deferred outflows of resources, you see an increase of approximately $2.2 million, and that's mainly due to the additional employer contribution that the agency made during the current fiscal year, the audit year, that was moved under pension outflows, and it will be recognized as a reduction of the long-term pension liability in the 2021 fiscal year. Any questions so far? Moving on to page 11. So the significant variance is shown under the long-term liabilities, and again, you can see that it's $35,288,000 in the current year versus $39 million in the prior year. And again, the reason for the decrease is the two principal payments that were made on the long-term debt in the current year. And then in the net position, we have an increase in the net investment in capital assets, and that's related to the current year decrease in the long-term debt that was associated with the capital assets, as I mentioned earlier. The restricted for loan, state loan repayment, again, because Fund 4 was not a restricted category at June 30, 2020 due to the payoff of the loan. That restricted category zeroed out this year. Any questions on page 11? Page 12 is the statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, otherwise income statements. Operating revenues are fairly consistent with prior year. And under the operating expense section, see the total operating expenses increased by approximately $2.3 million, and that mainly relates to the pension, the additional pension expense, and the increase in the pension expense this year compared to prior year. Also, there were some additional plant operating expenses, engineering costs during the year. And capital contributions, connection fees decreased by approximately $800,000 in the current year compared to prior year. Any questions on the income statement? Moving on, I addressed the cash flow statements. I'm not sure if there are any additional questions on pages 13 and 14 on the cash flow statement.
I had a question on cash flow.
Sure.
On page 13, when we're talking about you have principal payment on loan at 2.577. That was the old principal that was paid off, correct?
Right. So that principal payment was made on the loan back in October, which was the normal principal payment schedule on that loan prior to the payoff of the loan, I believe, in February when the bonds were issued.
And so the new payment on the loan that we did pay is 2.180, correct?
Right, and that's the first principal payment that was made on the bond. And the bond agreement states a due date of July 1st of each year, but the trustee requires that payment to be transferred a few days prior to the due date in order for them to process. Therefore, the wire transfer actually took place right before year end, I believe on June 26th.
Because that amount is almost a $400,000 difference between 2.577 and 2.180. If that 2.180 is the new bond payment on the refi. It's interesting because originally I thought it was proposed to us that we're going to have a savings of by refinancing, we're going to have a savings of $250,000 a year, but actually it's almost $400,000 a year.
So what, if you go back to the...
Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think what you may be missing there is that you paid a significant bond premium that gets amortized against that also. So
Okay.
that increases the cost, probably about very close to, the amount that you're short there, and just looking at what the principal payment is. The bond premium was paid up front, so therefore, is not reflected. I guess it's reflected in the new financing, but the amortization of that will be included with the interest expense down below on an annual basis.
So that premium amortization will offset your interest expense each year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And starting on page 15, pages 15 through 45 are the notes to the financial statements. And I'm not going to go into it in detail. I would just like to point out the pension. Let's see, on page 31, the recognized pension expense on the last paragraph on that page, that 2.98 million, which is a calculated pension expense. It's an estimate based on the changes in the net pension liability and the deferred outflow inflow amortization. This balance is not what the agency actually paid. It's an actuary estimate, and that's what was recorded as into pension expense in the current year. And this balance can fluctuate based on the actuary calculation. It can have a debit or credit balance. And the same situation is with the other post-employment benefit expense on page 42. As you can see in the first paragraph on that page, where the 409,000 credit balance showed that was recorded under the OPEB expense as the result of the actuary report and calculation. You can also see the employer contribution, how it is for the pension. If I could turn to page 32. You can see on that table, the first table, the components of the deferred outflows of resources that is in total shows up on the balance sheet. You see that $4 million first line item, that's the agency's current year pension contribution.
That's the actual cash.
Which was the actual contribution, but because our measurement date for the net pension liability calculation is a year behind, which is June 30, 19, therefore, the employer contribution that was made after June 30, 19 is part of the deferred outflows of resources. And next year, it will be recognized into the reduction of your net pension liability. And the same situation on other post-employment benefit on page 42, where you can see the current year OPEB contribution of $619,000. That is part of the deferred outflow of resources as of June 30, 2020.
One thing I thought that was kind of interesting, and just wanted to point it out, I know you've all reviewed the financials, but on page 40 is the total OPEB liability in the first column. And we see that at the end of 2019, which Vera mentioned, we're always a year behind in the OPEB calculations, but you got about $11.4 million there in liability, and the middle column is what's actually, your fiduciary trust that's funded. is 11,163,000. So you're very close to being fully funded. Your net liability on your OPEB obligation is 324,000 as of the end of 2019 there. Kind of big numbers, just wanted to point that out that, you know, we're dealing with, you know, a potential liability to the district that's quite large, that's been pretty much fully funded, and just a small amount due out there, which allows the agency to go ahead and start, you know, having the trust pay out the retiree health care benefits on an annual basis, as opposed to having to pay them out of the district account, district or your agency's own general account.
Oh, I have a question. This is Dave. With that 324,000, I'm struggling with what we were just talking about with the OPEB payments, that we were paying 55,000 a month. And are you saying that that's going to go down? Or is that something different? I'm a little confused.
So the 50,000 that Vicki mentioned, if you look at on this table, you can see the employer contributions as benefit payment, 613,949, and this is as of June 30, 19 again, because our measurement date is a year sooner than the financial statement date. But that's the approximate 50-something thousand multiplied by 12. So you can see that's it increases your fiduciary net position and ultimately reduces your net pension liability on the last column. There's a negative 613 there. So that's where that employer contribution is calculated in.
And that would continue on, is what you're saying?
I'm sorry?
And that would continue on? That employer contribution that we're talking about?
But that was the actual employer contribution for as of June 30, 2019.
But you're saying
I think June 30, 2020.
You're pretty much fully funded, so you know, and you know, kind of turning this over to the trust and letting them pay the employer share of the healthcare benefits, but you know, it continues because of the actuarial calculations and reevaluation every 2 years. You know, these numbers change, you know, going forward each year, and all these various components become a part of that. So we're always going to have some small amount as a liability. Hopefully we don't go the other way, because unfortunately we can't get the money back out of the trust. You know, it's an irrevocable trust. Once the agency's money is transferred, it becomes part of that trust. So it's sort of a delicate balancing act there. But, you know, keep in mind that in addition to the actual, you know, payment of benefits, you also have all these other actuarial accounting that translate to accounting adjustments that have to go on within that liability.
So that would continue on. Okay. That was my question. All right.
Yeah.
And so any increases or decreases in that employer contribution will affect ultimately your ending net OPEB liability.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And that's something that the actuary incorporates in his calculation based on the information that the agency provides him. And then just would like to highlight on pages 47 through 50, you can find the required supplementary information, which is just more information on OPEB contributions, the changes in the net OPEB liability, which here it's an accumulated 10-year schedule. So all the prior year data is also shown, and also changes proportionate share of the agency's net pension liability and the pension contributions. Again, accumulated 10-year schedules ultimately that need to be shown on these schedules. And then you can find the supplementary information on pages 52 and 53 related to the budget to actual analysis. Are there any questions on the financial statements? Okay, I would just like to highlight the second issued report, which is our communication letter, governance letter to the board.
Oops,
I still have to finish.
I got paused. Hit that again. Oops. Okay,
There we go.
okay.
So this is our required communication to the board governance letter, which addresses significant audit matters, which includes the adoption of any significant new accounting policies or any changes in the agency's existing policies. And there were no new accounting policies adopted for the year ended June 30, 2020. The letter also addresses any significant estimates, and the most significant estimates are the pension and OPEB liability related assumptions that were used in the agency's actuaries study that resulted in a calculation of the net pension and the net OPEB liability. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with management in performing and completing our audits. We also are required to communicate or to accumulate all known and likely misstatements that we identify during our audit, and all material misstatements that were detected were corrected by management. And if you look at the last 2 pages of the governance letter, you can see the summary of the adjusting journal entries that were recorded as a result of the audit. We also requested written confirmation from management to us about the fairness of the financial statement elements. The representation letter emphasizes management's representation and that management has responsibility over the fair presentation of the financial statements. As I mentioned when I highlighted the auditor's report, we also considered the agency's internal control for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the financial statements. However, we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the agency's internal controls. There is a separate communication letter that we issued on the internal control recommendation findings. Under the other matters paragraph, we applied certain limited procedures to the required supplementary information, as I mentioned before, but we did not audit the required supplementary information.
Yeah, we've kind of gone over the auditor.
Okay. Are there any questions on the governance letter? Okay. The third document that we issued is the internal control communication letter. As I mentioned, we considered the internal controls over financial reporting. And during this process, we identified certain deficiencies that we considered to be significant deficiencies and some other recommendations that are opportunities for the agency to strengthen their internal controls and operating efficiencies. As the board had the opportunity to read and review this letter, we are happy to address any questions.
Well, that was easy.
Okay, all right. And just would like to highlight, we issued a separate agreed upon procedure report. As required by California law, we performed certain agreed upon procedures applied to the appropriation limits to make sure that they met the applicable requirements. And we noted no exceptions in relation to our procedures and the calculation of the appropriation limit. Are there any questions on any of the reports?
This is Blake. Hi, Vera. Hi, Ron. Thank you, guys. My question is, I know that I think it was our last board meeting, we approved a change order for the work you did this past year. I think a large part due to a lot of change in software that the agency went through. And I was just wondering, you know, and Ron, you might be able to hit on this more. Vera, maybe you have enough experience also, having come to the district, you know, how it was to do the audit with this investment in the new software. Those were big changes at the agency and gathering the data and all that. Is it just some sort of, you know, qualitative comment about, you know, this new software? Is that something that you guys, it sounds like you had to interact with, and so I'm just curious, from my perspective, the financial reporting that I see coming out of the agency now is, you know, light years ahead of what I used to see. And just wondering from an audit standpoint, if it also is easier to get access to the financial information.
Yeah, I think, and I'll have Vera chime in too on her thoughts, but, I did a review of the new software and reports shortly after the board meeting last year. And, it is a much more robust system that, allows a lot more reporting flexibility, and definitely, I think the agency has actually gone through, and Michelle, you can correct me on this, like 2 or 3 software implementations in the last 2 or 3 years. And, the staff has really been through, a process in those evolutions. A lot of districts can't, it takes years just to get one system up and running, new one. But, the challenge was that, they had several different changes in software. And so, I felt, we saw that was very challenging to the staff, and, they've come through, and, there's, a few areas that can be improved. I think one of the ones that, I felt, in doing the technical review on the audit this year is, was just in the fixed asset module. The agency's still using Excel spreadsheets to record capital asset acquisitions and also depreciation. And, Excel is, in my, professional career, very, very weak product, way to keep your depreciation. And, I think one of our recommendations in the internal control communication this year is that management go ahead now that they've got the software implemented and in place that, they seem to be happy with and comfortable to use, to move forward in expanding that software capability to include a fixed asset module that enhances the district's ability to maintain the fixed assets, buildings improvement, and all the vehicles and so forth and equipment, in a much more user-friendly, application. Excel depreciation schedules, leave a lot to be desired. And, staff, I think Vera found throughout the audit that, that might be an area that management may want to look at and, just enhancing the system that they've got. And I think I'll let Vera comment, she was actually hands-on more in the reports and so forth. Vera, how did,
and with the change
how
of
did you feel of the new system, and what were your thoughts?
right, with the new, with the new general ledger accounts, that always creates additional challenges to map up the prior year and current year accounts for the analysis, the various analysis, ratio analysis that we have to perform as part of our audit. So those challenges and setting up the trial balance in the compatible form with the prior year general ledger balances created some additional issues. Not issues, just additional challenges and additional work.
How does staff, I guess, Michelle, and Rochelle, how do you feel about the new system? And, any, been through the first audit and,
It was definitely taxing, but it will be great if we don't have to change our GL codes ever again.
Yes.
Time's a charm. Right, Michelle?
Okay.
I would like to thank staff and management for their assistance during the audit. And
absolutely, we appreciate it.
And our audit staff, and we,
Thank you, guys too. You guys have been great.
Bless you.
Thank you. So President Cox, this agenda item was just for the presentation. If you wanted to close this item and move to the next item, which would be to approve, to receive and file the annual audit, that would be the next appropriate step, sir.
Okay, let's do that, LaRue. If there's no further questions or comments on the audit presentation, let's move to approve and to file the annual financial audit for the year 2020, 2019-2020.
Hey, Dale.
Go ahead.
I did have a question on the previous item. So in the management letter, they did not identify deficiencies in internal control that they considered to be material weaknesses. So that's very positive. Material weakness is something you don't want to see in an audit. It did identify deficiencies in internal control that were in the kind of the next level below that, referred to as significant deficiencies. And with that, there was communication on what those areas for improvement were with management and then responses from management. I was hoping to hear from LaRue in terms of the those areas where there were deficiencies, what your thoughts are on how to correct those over the course of the next year.
Right. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, a lot of the deficiencies, we did review them with the auditors. They were found to be minor. A lot of them we found were determined were because we just hadn't been exposed to that sort of accounting procedure or hadn't done it in a while. So the plan moving forward is to take note of these when we bring in the financial audit, when we bring in the new finance and administrative manager, let them be aware of the deficiency, make sure that they're addressed for the upcoming year, and then we don't repeat these.
And I'd be curious to hear from either Ron or Vera in terms of those areas. Do you see this in your experience? Is this an inordinate number of deficiencies, or is this not uncommon in your experience with other public agencies? There's definitely a lot of information that's being collected, reported, and then reviewed by you in the audit. So I'd be curious to hear your opinions on that.
Well, from a auditor's perspective, you go through periods of change with any agency, district, whatever. And, certainly, a lot of these comments come out of both, the changes in systems and procedures and, staff's, trying to cope with or, working with trying to adapt and change the internal controls in that. So, when you see a year like this, I mean, it's very common to see, deficiencies out there because you completely revamped your whole system and way of reporting. And, we as auditors, and staff is scrambling, as they pointed out, they had to recode all of the district's transactions and that several times to accommodate these new changes in the system to get it to where, they were happy with the system and management was happy with the reports that they were receiving. So, you will see, whenever you change a system like this, and it's our job as auditors to, hey, if we see this going on, is our part of our audit, to bring these to management's attention so that they do get special consideration going forward, and that management reevaluate their internal controls, and how can we work towards and monitor the system going forward so that these don't reoccur. Okay, the one thing you don't want to do is have these be a continuous reoccurrence from year to year.
And besides the accounting software, there was also a change in the process of how the service charge revenue is being collected through the counties now. So that created a couple additional findings here in the current year that were never apparent during the prior year audits and as a result of the prior year audit. Again, anytime there's a change in process, we as part of the audit have to go through and evaluate those controls, again, not for expressing an opinion, but to be able to plan our audit procedures. And so, every time there's a new procedure, a new process, we have to go through and identify any new key controls that should be in place. And so that's what visible in this, in several of these findings, as the billing process was new. We identified some controls that should be implemented. And then, of course, the change in the software. And some of the other ones, you know, are like the depreciation schedule. That's, again, as Ron mentioned, you know, using Excel spreadsheets does present a lot of opportunity for manual errors, and that's something to consider.
Yeah, you know, and I
Okay,
think that
with that, if we have any more comments from the board, I'd like to move on to any public comment. Rochelle?
We do have a public comment. Was that all for the board director comments before I move forward?
Okay, any further comments from the board in regards to Vera and Ron's presentation?
Okay. We have Pippin Mater would like to make a comment. Hang on, where did he go? Okay, go ahead, Pippin.
Great, thank you, Rochelle. I want to reference a couple of the board packet page numbers. So I'm looking at page 90, which is the report page 7. And specifically, I'm looking at the operating expenses, and that has gone up by 15%. So that's that second number down in that table, A2. And that's a pretty big number. I guess I was a little surprised by that. I would also point out that the net position has gone down, that net position being the last line, by about 1%. And I assume that that is not corrected for inflation. So that, you know, if you're going the wrong way of inflation, you know, that seems like a little bit of a concern. I recognize it being only 1%, but on the other hand, it's definitely headed the wrong direction. And that's sort of like not the from a financial perspective, that's a little concerning. Then looking at page 97, which is page 13 of the report. Let me make sure I have that right. Yeah, so at the very bottom of that page, there's the total cash flow has gone down by 6 million. It went from 51,700 last year to 45,800 this year. And I was just kind of wondering if there was some more information about why exactly that number went down. And then I'll go ahead. I've got one last comment. It's on page 154. So that is, it sort of aligns with what Dan was saying. So that's the, so that's board packet page 154, which is the, you know, the significant and, let me see here, make sure I have this right. Yeah, the significant and non-significant or material weaknesses. And I will, you know, like Dan mentioned, there's definitely a fair number of significant deficiencies listed here. And I guess like I would encourage the agency and the staff to consider working in the future, working with the auditors to make sure that that software gets set up correctly in the first place. So you can really limit those number of significant deficiencies, especially because it's a new system that just got put together. The one that sort of stood out to me was the cash basis recorded of service charge versus the running totals. That seems like a pretty substantial miscalculation or misuse of the audit. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Any further comment from the public?
There are no other public comments, sir.
Okay, with that, thank you very much, Ron. Thank you, Vera, for a very in-depth presentation. At this time, I'd like to move on to item V5, and that is approve and receive and file the annual financial audit for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Can I get a motion?
Need a
I'd move
motion.
Approval. I
Okay,
would move
Dan.
approval of accepting and filing the audit for fiscal year 1920.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion on the floor and a second. No further questions or comments. Roll call, please.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Vera.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
both.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's move on to exhibit number 6. And that is a consideration and possible action on Board of Directors nomination to 1 regular and 1 alternative seat on Placer County LAFCO Formation Commission.
Thank you, President Cox. Yeah, in the board packet is a letter submitted by Placer County LAFCO. And as you stated, they are soliciting nominations for 1 regular and 1 alternative special district representative seat on their commission. The term is for 4 years and expires in 2024. They've already operated 1 year with their current representatives, so it would be the fulfillment of the remaining balance till 2023. Nomination period closes at 4:30 on March 16th. It is not required that any of the board of directors be nominated, but I wanted to bring it to your attention should one of you wish to be on the nomination ballot, on the ballot rather. So if I can receive direction from the board, if any of the board of directors would like to be placed as a seat or be recommended as a seat.
I think we ought to have Blake do it.
That's Placer County.
Down the river.
Dale, I was
I
thinking
like it.
something about
I like
you.
it, Blake.
As president, I feel that I have the power to give an executive order to get Blake in there.
Thanks, Dale. I'm going to pass on that, if that's okay.
So there is no action, President Cox. I do see heads shaking no. So with that, we can proceed to the next item, sir.
Okay, so nobody's interested? Is that what I understand? It's okay to move on to the next agenda item. We have no public comment.
None, sir.
Okay, let's talk about the management team reports. What's up, Jay?
We'll start with Michael Peak with the operations report.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Please proceed, Michael.
Good morning, Dale, Board of Directors. Michael Peak, Operations Department Manager. For the January department report, all plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. In the Operations Department, overall, the plant performed well through the month. Well 31 pH has been between 6.5 and 6.7. Operations continues to add caustic to the effluent, final effluent. Staff continue to train with the lab personnel for the weekend laboratory testing. In the laboratory, staff perform necessary laboratory testing per WDR requirements and operational needs for the month. Staff continue to train the operators for NPN and weekend testing. Recruitment for the laboratory director position has closed and interviews are scheduled for the end of February. Staff continue to work to complete the demonstration of capabilities, DOCs, and standard operating procedures, SOPs, and training program compliance requirements. Work orders, we have 6 outstanding, or 6 completed and 5 outstanding. And you can see the plant data supports that we met all our discharge requirements for the month. Does anybody have any questions for the operations department?
Operations Department Manager Peak, what do we have? I mean, how many applicants do we have for the lab, and how many inside or outside applicants?
We had 10 total applicants for the position, and out of those 10, 2 of them were from internal.
Okay. The other question I had with regards, let's go back, way back in the public comment with Jane Davis's comment about those flow meters. What, could you comment on that?
Pertaining to what part of her comments as far as flow meters we've
Are we in violation?
that I know of, we have not been cited with any type of a violation, no.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may add, Lane, there was also comment stated that that meter was calibrated annually. We did not find any records to support that statement.
All right, thank you.
I've got a question, Mike. It has to do with the pH. So my understanding was that a few years ago, we were trying to limit the amount of caustic that we were adding to our effluent out of caution that could have other unintended consequences. And so my understanding of this, this whole pH issue is that the pH level of the effluent where it directly left our plant met waste discharge requirements at the exit point of our plant. And then we put that effluent into the ground where it percolated through the soil. I think our injection point into the ground is about a mile up gradient from the well where the pH violations had occurred. And something was happening between, in the ground between where we were discharging effluent that met the waste discharge requirements to where the groundwater readings a mile downstream were causing the pH levels to be just below the waste discharge requirements periodically and within that during other times. So what we've done recently is we've begun adding caustic to our effluent to basically elevate the pH level at the discharge point of the plant. It's still within our waste discharge requirements, but it's closer to the upper end of the acceptable limit than it used to be, with the hope being that putting higher pH level effluent into the ground at the discharge point of the plant would then create a downstream effect of raising the pH level at the down gradient monitoring well. And so my understanding is that's the primary operations change that's been made recently in response to the pH issue. For the last few months, those pH readings have been within the waste discharge requirements. It's still, just for me, I'm not, whenever you put water in the ground and then it percolates for a mile and then you measure the constituents in that water a mile down gradient, there's lots of things that can happen in the substrate of the soil that can affect what's going on with that water quality. So I guess what I'm curious about is if you might think that adding the caustic to our effluent, if that's having a material effect on the pH level at those down gradient wells, or whether it's potentially coincidental that that's happening.
So I think it's hard to say. It's a huge body of water that's underneath the ground that you've got influence above us. You've got the influence of what's happening in the ground. Overall, I was actually the one who stopped the addition of caustic to the effluent, because back in about 2011, we had this same occurrence of a pH that dropped below the 6.5 units, was a 6.4. And at that time, the operations superintendent or operations manager started actually at the addition of caustic to the effluent off and on throughout the time. Whenever that groundwater got to what he felt was low, would start to add that caustic addition. My feeling was that it didn't have an impact or a substantial impact on the groundwater. And at that time, it was a decision the operations made was to stop the addition of the caustic solution, which can add other constituents to the effluent that can have other limitations like TDS and total dissolved solids and such so forth. So we stopped adding that caustic at that time. We did not see that suppression in pH for quite some time after that, and then subsequently, I don't know what the exact time frame was, but at some point we had some of those 6.4s on that on the well 31 pH, and most of them were in a relatively tight time frame. They were within like kind of a 1 month period. We had like 3, and then subsequently, without adding any constituent or of caustic or anything like that to the effluent, that pH came back up on its own for whatever reasons, upgrading issues or whatever else was going on in the ground. pH came back up on its own without any changes. We maintained our compliance for a certain amount of time, and then it would dip down again for a time or two, and then it would come back by itself into that range of the 6.5 to 8.5. So, I mean, it's hard to say for sure, concrete, yes, adding the caustic is keeping us out of that that zone of the 6.4 pH limit, or the 6.5 pH limit. We really haven't seen a substantial increase in that pH at well 31 since we started adding the caustic. We have not gone down below the 6.5, but we're at 6.5 quite frequently, and it's anywhere between the 6.5 and the 6.7. But we had that same range when we weren't adding caustic. So it's really hard to say that adding the caustic is a benefit or helping us not violate at that well 31. I hope that answers the question. Is that clear?
Well, it's the answer is clear, yes, and it's a tough question because I think what you as the operations management and staff have is a high degree of control over the water quality of the effluent at the direct exit point of the plant. But then once that effluent gets introduced into the ground, the degree of control that we have is it goes away, basically. We don't have the ability to in a meaningful way affect what's happening in groundwater flow, downgrading of the plant, and groundwater flow that's kind of inflow into the disposal field. So, there's been a lot made recently of the violations at well 39. I'm concerned that there's potentially some context being lost in that the effluent at the point of discharge from the plant has consistently met the pH requirements of the State Water Board, and it's only after that effluent has percolated through the ground for weeks and months, and then it's then measured or it's then sampled at the groundwater monitoring well where these violations have happened. And I've had some concern that fact has been kind of lost in some of the comments and some of the hyperbole that we've heard around this topic over the past months and years. Doesn't mean we don't want to continue to strive to cause that groundwater to meet the waste discharge requirements. It's just a much different set of tools that we have available to us to cause that to occur, and I just wanted to recognize that.
Go ahead, Blake.
Just following up on Dan's comments, Mike, just what is the caustic material that you're adding and how much do we actually add? And do you guys see a increased level of TDS or electroconductivity or something because of that?
At what point are you asking for the TDS at like well 31 on the effluent itself, or?
Yeah, it'd either be at the probably down at well 31.
I can get that information for you and bring it back next month and see if there's any differences. We can go back a little bit. To answer your question of what pH control we're trying to establish at the effluent pipe, right now we have a set point of 7 pH units is what we've set the caustic pump to try to maintain. So it'll maintain anywhere, you know, between about a 6.9 and a 7.1 on the pH. So the caustic is added basically to try to maintain that neutral pH going out to the ground.
It's not a fixed rate. It's actually on a variable delivery depending on the pH of the effluent. You bring it up to 7. If it comes in above 7, you're not adding anything. If it starts to dip below that, it demand feeds it. So it's a variable amount. Interesting.
Yes. But going back also to before we were adding caustic, looking at the daily averages on the pH going out to the disposal fields before the addition, we never dropped below that 6.5, which is the compliance point at well 31. So we were always above that 6.5 pH units, leaving the plant without the addition of the caustic.
And then Mike's slight change of topic, but the final bulleted item in your report under the laboratory, continuing to work on the demonstration of capabilities, standard operating procedures, and training programs. Those are in reference to the notice of violation the agency had from the ELAP.
Yes, they were. And also, oh, I'm sorry, were you finished with your question?
It was kind of a follow-up there is, will there be a point at which, you know, we'll be notified that we're no longer in a notice of compliance? I can't remember what the compliance schedule was, or, you know, what point we, you know, are no longer considered to be in that state with ELAP.
So we have replied to their notice, and we're waiting for them to get back to us on what their findings are at this point. But just to elaborate a little bit more, we are trying to, it was found that we were lacking quite a bit on the DOCs and the standard operating procedures through that investigation that the ELAP had investigated the agency or the lab. And, you know, working with the staff now, we're trying to get caught up and get up to what is required by ELAP to meet their compliance points. So the lab staff have done a great job in getting us there. So I do want to say thank you to them, because you know, they've told us that there was a lot of work involved for them to get us where we're at now. And we're just had a meeting the other day with Bill Pindar, that lab director, and he said that we're probably by the end of this week will be about 80% there for the DOCs and for the SOPs. And just to give you a little bit of a you know, a look at what it was in the past, the DOC's demonstration of capabilities, basically what the lab had done was just for whatever samples specific chemists ran, those were the DOCs or the PTs, the unknown samples that they would run and report as their results. But we found out through this investigation process that actually any number or any sample that an analyst runs, they should have a DOC on file that they've shown a demonstration of capability to be able to process that sample and come up with quality data. And we weren't doing that in the past. So this is what we're talking about. We're trying to get caught up and become compliant. And again, lab staff have been doing a good job to try to get us there. So does that
Thanks, Mike.
answer your question?
Yeah, that helped. Thank you.
Anything else, Mike?
I have a question, Dale.
Go ahead.
Back to Michael. What is the elapsed time, more or less, or average, from the discharge point to well 31? How long does it take for the effluent to get from point A to point B?
So that's about 40 to 45 days on average. Of course, it's going to vary with the amount of flow going through the plant, of course, but on average throughout the year, it's about 40 to 45 days.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else, Mike?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions for Mike, let's move on to Richard. What's up, Richard?
Morning, President Cox, Board of Directors, Richard Palente, Maintenance Manager. For the month of January, continue to support engineering projects for the headworks upgrade, chlorine scrubber, waste activated sludge pump upgrade, and the chiller. The remainder of the month was pretty standard with PMs. Pretty limited on corrective work orders that came in. We did have to take the gap back down, get a new DPF filter put on it, and finished up the loading hopper silo and had a few pump rebuilds. But for the majority of the month, it was PMs and some various safety work orders that came in from the safety audit. We're continuing to recruit for the CMMS GIS position that we have open. We received about 6 or 7 applicants. None of them were, what I'll say is highly desired. A lot of people were limited on their experience. We're holding on to those applicants, and we opened it up again to see if we can get a bigger applicant pool with some more skilled applicants coming in. We had no internal applicants for that position. That pretty much wraps up the monthly report for maintenance. Any questions or?
Yeah, Richard, I had a question with regard, it gets back to, on the consent calendar with regards to the trash pumps that we're buying and the power packs. I compliment the staff on taking the initiative to do it in-house. Do we have a ballpark estimate of what, when you call a contractor to go in and clean the digester, what was do you know what the average cost was per digester to clean?
I don't know for here. I'd have to defer that to Michael because in the past that's been handled by operations. They
okay.
reached out.
Yeah, I can answer that for you, Richard.
Yeah.
In the past, in the past we've contracted that out, and it's been coming in the order of $100,000 for outside service. So each year, that we have a digester cleaning project, we basically save that amount of money. It's
I'd say that's a pretty good investment at $72,000 for saving $100,000. Plus, you have the equipment on board for other cleaning projects within the plant that could be utilized elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Great move.
Yes, and there are some other costs involved in the digester cleaning as far as ordering dewatering bins and so on and so forth. But those costs are definitely lower when you look at the overall cost to have a contractor come in. So the pump's not the only cost, but you're right, it will have multiple uses throughout the plant too. And we're pretty proud of the fact that we can handle that ourselves, and it helps us too with time constraints. We don't have to have a digester out of service a week later to have the contractor come in. It really helps us out a lot. So I think it's.
I just look at the ownership. The ownership of the employees doing the job compared to outside contracting is far better for the district as a whole. And the more you can do, the better.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to Jay. What's up, Jay?
Good afternoon, directors. In the month of January, engineering staff performed work on a large number of projects here, list 16 different projects. So at the expense of, or instead of going through each one of these and dragging everybody down with time, does anybody have any questions on any of these projects?
Jay, what percentage completion are we at with the Carollo Sewer Master Plan?
I'd probably give it about an 85%, somewhere in there. We've seen chapters from them. We give them back with comments that they have to respond to. So we haven't seen the full roll up yet. They do have a number of questions that we had that they've got to investigate and get us answers back. So I'm hoping in the next few months we'll see something from them, or we'll be in a position to be able to present something to you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thanks, Jay, for a streamlined report.
You're welcome.
What's up, Bob?
And you're muted, Bob.
Of course. Okay. Good afternoon. The IT department has been focused on infrastructure upgrades for our web services. The work we've done from our last board meeting include configuration of a new PIS and SIS server. We've secured new software versioning control server that will allow multiple developers of our SCADA software. We have new security infrastructure server that has been configured to house centralized firewall configurations, wireless access control, and intrusion detection throughout our IT and our facility in general. Our new IT specialist, Luke Swan, who you met a little bit earlier in this meeting, has been here for about 3 weeks now. We are continuing with his training, and I'm pleased to say that so far he's been of great help, and he is learning our systems very, very well. We're continuing to assist the engineering department with their projects, providing help with mostly the chlorine system process hazard analysis project. Also for maintenance, we've been assisting the contractors who are installing our security cameras, and we're providing them IT support, mostly with networking and things like that. For operations, we continue with upgrades and modifications to the logbook web portal application, which is being used more and more for interdepartmental communications and status updates. Lastly, I wanted to add some commentary on our IT security in context with what's been going on in the news. Over the past few weeks, I've gotten a lot of emails and forwarded articles about the security breach of a water treatment facility in Florida. Not to say that there isn't any good information in these newsy articles. However, we in the IT department approach this information in a little bit of a different way than just reading the headlines and fretting about all the different possible ways our facility may or may not get hacked, causing damage to our environment, the plant, its employees, the community, and our reputation. We rather get our information reports on a continuing basis by being subscribers and participants in programs from various government agencies, specifically the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the sub-department, the Industrial Control Systems Joint Working Group. These were both agencies under the Department of Homeland Security. In fact, the IT staff will be attending classes for 2 days in early March, provided by the ICSJWG. Now, this was done way before this news article came out about this hack in Florida. And we'll be implementing focused and targeted changes that we deem need to be made. We want to make sure that we don't make knee-jerk reactions, wasting money and resources due to news cycle fear and paranoia. Not to say we shouldn't be vigilant and a little bit paranoid. After reading the reports, I'm paraphrasing now, the break-in into their SCADA system occurred most likely through remote access software that wasn't accounted for, and exploiting weakened cybersecurity measures including weak passwords, out-of-date operating systems that don't have security updates, the hackers were able to get into this agency system. Here at the plant, we do have a need for remote access to monitor the plant given to operations management and IT staff. All communications and access go through encrypted channels with only specific TTSA-owned and controlled laptops, given the keys to allow for this communications and access. I want to assure the board and the community in general that we do take our cybersecurity very seriously. There is always much to be learned from occurrences like this. We will be having ongoing discussions with operations and engineering for real paths forward, implementing proper resources so that we may leverage this incident and future ones that are certain to happen to make our security system here at TTSA stronger and more resilient to any enduring future attacks. So with that, I hope that it kind of allays some of the, some of the buzz around at least what I've been getting and, listening to on the news and things like that. So if there's any questions.
Sounds good, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale.
And thank you for getting me a new computer out here. I'll be bringing the old one in on Monday.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. LaRue?
Yeah. Moving on, I'll touch base real briefly on the administrative report. In addition,
What about Rochelle?
I'll get to her next.
Okay.
well, yeah, I was going to address the administrative report on her behalf.
Okay.
When it comes to additional stuff not listed in here, I just want to let the board be aware of the fact that staff's done a great job moving over to our new benefit structure. So commencing January 1st, we had a lot of new benefits come in. We had to implement that, coordinate that with our new administration or the administrator for the benefits, tie that into Cassell. With any integration and working agreement between the two, there were some issues, so that was resolved. So thank you for staff for that. Additionally, I'd like to announce that we also got off of our paperless. We are now moved on to a paperless timesheet. So I thank everybody for going through that. We went through a one-pay period where we did a trial run to see how it went, and everything went smoothly. So it's nice that we're starting to use the software to its full capacity on that. So with that, I have no additional comments to the administrative report. And I can take any questions if there are any.
Okay, is there any people that have any questions in regards to the operations and management reports?
I have one.
Rochelle, anybody online?
Well, I have one.
I guess
Go
we'll
ahead,
take
David. I'm sorry.
board first.
Yeah, this is really out there. This goes clear back to the financial report on page 5 under financial highlights. It just said in that second paragraph down that our capacity, which should accommodate growth in the service area population through the year 2025. This is just for my own information. Does this include the population growth we've had recently? With the COVID-19, we've got just a ton of people, extra people up here. Does this 2025, is that taken into account?
The 2025 was a projection of a carryover from last year, David. It does take into account for that. And when the master plan comes in with their projections from our other member districts, we'll be able to update that accordingly. So when that statement was carried over, the growth rate that was applied last year was assumed to continue as it did for this year.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Are we ready
directors?
Sorry, any other board directors have a question before I move to public comment? No? Okay.
Go ahead, Rochelle.
Public comment from Pippin Mater. Go ahead, Pippin.
Great. I'll be quick, guys. Thanks a ton. I just had a couple of quick questions. One was, I appreciate, Michael, you including those flow charts in the end of your report. And I did have a question about whether those did reflect a change, the correct calibration, or whether those didn't. So would want a little bit of update on that or reflect that in the documentation that went with it. I also want to say I agree with Dan. There's little understanding about how the field works and why it is no longer working the way it originally did. This really dovetails into the master plan. I would encourage the master plan to include a study of the field and to consider whether the current field is working as needed or whether the modifications are needed. And again, regarding the master plan, I want to make sure I get my 2 cents in before it is sort of written in stone, or at least in hard or sand or whatever before it comes out in a draft form. I'm gonna harp on UV disinfectant. I'm all for UV disinfectant. As a local, I'd like to not have chlorine gas be leaked. And then in the biomass and digester emissions, I'd really like you to encourage the master plan to include an analysis of hydrogen production. It's fairly standard. It can be cost saving over the long term, and it's consistent with the community's emission reduction priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and that's all I have.
Okay, comments from the directors. Go ahead, Blake.
President Cox, I'll just fill in. And did you want to go to the general manager report first?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. I'll be brief. There's nothing really much to add. I already brought that up in the administrative report. I do want to point out that I did include an FTE summary, which is an organizational chart, which essentially identifies the FTEs assigned for the classification as well as those currently filled. You'll have a status as to what the FTEs are at the time. So with that, I have nothing else to add.
Any questions for LaRue? Seeing none, hearing none. Board of Directors comments. Go ahead, Blake.
I have nothing at this time. Thanks.
Dan?
No comments. Thank you.
David?
You're muted.
Muted. No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Lane?
Yeah, I'd like to commend administration staff on getting, getting all the prerequisites for the audit up. Things look pretty good there. And I know that is a ton of work. And thank you, administration staff, for doing that, following up with the Moore Hamrick and getting them the materials to do the audit.
Okay, thanks, Lane. I got one comment. I wanted to follow up with Dan's questions with the operations report with Michael. Several years ago, we had some anomalies starting to occur with our SAT system. And at that time, we had Richard give us a in-depth presentation on how that SAT system works. And he did make a comment, and Jay, you might want to chime in as much as that at that time, Richard said that nothing is forever. And we've been using that SAT system for quite a long time. And back at that time, I asked if there was any chance that we should start culturing a new location in our SAT system so that we could start building the bacteria in the ground to start maybe moving over to a new SAT system that would be fresh. And Jay, can you remember what Richard's comment was on that? He seemed to think that our SAT system was going to last for a very long time, although he did make the comment that nothing was forever. So there might be a possibility that we might want to think about culturing a new SAT section of our real estate.
Yeah, with respect to Richard's comment, I think he was probably referring to what is in our permit. There's a diagram at the back of the permit that basically outlines where that second field would go. And so I think he was just basically keeping that possibility open of starting a new field. As to the operational aspects of starting the new field, I would leave that, Michael, I don't know if you want to add anything on your own in terms of what that would mean operationally vis-a-vis Richard's comment.
Operationally, basically the disposal field is designed to take the effluent and do polishing to the effluent before it goes back over to the Truckee River, so it's not a direct discharge. So I don't know about culturing the field or you know, if his comments were meant to actually do culturing, because the physical removals that we're seeing and the polishing that we're seeing in the disposal field is what it's doing, basically what it really ultimately was designed to do, is just take the direct our effluent discharge and then put it through the ground before it goes back over to the Truckee River. We did see some nitrification, denitrification activity happen in the ground at one point, and at some point that stopped to occur. But I don't think that originally that was ever thought that would be a benefit to the disposal field. And we don't know that would happen again based on the BNR system that we have now. We don't put the same nitrogen levels out into the ground that we used to with the old ion exchange system. So it's really not apples for apples when you're looking at what we had and what we are going to be moving forward to. So yeah, I believe the disposal fields have a long life left on them, and they're doing what they were originally intended to do.
Okay, thank you,
Does that
Michael.
help answer?
That is encouraging news. Is there anything else to be brought before this this monthly board meeting? Any questions or comments on anything that we've covered today? Any comments or questions from the public?
I have no public with their hands raised. No questions here.
Okay, with that being said, I'd like to close this meeting, and we'll be going into closed session. So with that, I'd like a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting of the month of February.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
It's been moved by Lewis, seconded by Smeltzer. Roll call, please.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved to adjourn, and the time is 12:33.